Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, March 3rd, 2016, welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. Hello and welcome and thank you for joining us this week on This Is Only a Test. I'm Norm. We're going to talk about technology. We're going to talk about virtual reality, maybe a little bit of science, and maybe some off-topic stuff this week. But I want to introduce my guests this week. To my immediate left, it's Jeremy Williams.
Hello.
You're out for 2 weeks, I believe.
Yep.
Doing all right?
Little podcast vacation.
Spend time with your real family.
I was testing Aulani in Hawaii, the Disney resort.
Ooh. I do want to hear about that. But immediately to Jeremy's left, back for a second week in a row, might be a regular occurrence. It's Will Smith.
Hey, man, this is a pretty good streak I got going.
Yeah.
The previous one was what, like 200 episodes or something?
Close.
160 episodes? I don't know.
Something like that. We're on episode 341.
How did that happen?
We counted several events multiple times.
Well, we needed clarity in the stream, as I recall. Our streams were convoluted and messy, so.
I like seeing you here.
If you divide that by 52, that's like 6 years of podcasts.
Yeah. We've been podcasting as long as the PC Gamer podcast and all those, the hotspot, all those early gaming podcasts.
What is the longest running podcast in existence?
I would go with
Twit.
I would go with
right?
Twit. Yep.
You think it's been going on for how many episodes now? Do they count? Have you just stopped counting?
They do count, but I have no idea. I can't be bothered to listen anymore.
They gotta be in forfeit. Wow. Shots fired.
I love Twit. I just don't have the time.
Well, I want to take the time to listen to about your adventure in Hawaii.
Tell me more.
Tell me about this Disney resort.
Well, you're familiar with it. It was built, 6-7 years ago. It was Disney's first resort destination that wasn't a theme park. And it's interesting because unlike Disneyland, you don't go to Disneyland to go to Anaheim. You go to Disneyland to see the theme park.
I don't know, man.
I like no diss because they're awesome.
Portillo's is nice.
Anaheim, the city actually has public ping pong tables in the parks. Who knew, though?
What paradise is this?
Because no one, explores outside of Disneyland. But unlike that, Aulani is you go to be in Hawaii. And Disneyland or Disney Aulani is a perfectly good place to stay while you're in Hawaii, but you don't necessarily go to be within the confines of the
Disney aspect of it is just like the set dressing.
It's complementary to what is surrounding the.
It's a coat of Disney
the resort.
paint.
Well, yeah,
so the kids can have brunch with Goofy.
And
really,
there's a lot of that. Yeah,
do they have the princess visits and all that stuff?
No, it's primarily like the core team. It's Disney,
Pluto.
Mickey, Pluto,
Donald,
but. I never saw Lilo and Stitch, and apparently that's a Hawaiian movie.
Yeah, yes. Lilo and Stitch is surprisingly good.
I wouldn't even say surprisingly. I think it's just good.
Well, it's surprisingly good because it was at a time when Disney was making kind of crappy traditional animation, and those movies are great.
Well, it was right. Wasn't it kind of right after Beauty and the Beast?
No, it was like It was before Brother Bear, but not when they were still making direct to video.
It was in the late '90s, early thousands, while Pixar was right in the middle of the hot Pixar streak.
Yeah,
and the director of Lilo and Stitch actually left and went to direct How to Train Your Dragon.
You're kidding me.
And that's one of the reasons. It's that
I love that movie.
Yeah,
in How to Train Your Dragon. What's the name of the character?
I don't remember.
Yeah,
Chester.
No, it's Dragonfoot or something. I don't know. It's a damaged
Littlefoot?
wing.
No,
not
that's Land Before Time.
That dragon has the same kind of expression as the Stitch character.
Is that right?
The
like
same wide grin.
Okay.
The same very flat face. French bulldog look.
Well, Lilo and is primarily Stitch actually play a big role at Aulani because he's Hawaiian. But it's super cool.
He's technically an alien?
Okay. Oh, well, I guess he lives in Hawaii now, right?
Yeah.
Is that where he crash landed?
Yeah.
It's cool. The whole park was designed from the ground up with this Imagineering aspect where you can you go to the front desk and you borrow like an iPad that's encased in this wicker plastic thing, and then it guides you around the resort and it activates various contraptions that you can't see until they're activated on the iPad. So like these lights will come out of rocks. You'll set fire to the side of a volcano, and the fire, you see it through this part of the volcano that looks like a shark that you never noticed before. This huge boulder will like go into a lake, and the parts of the boulder that are still on, above the water form the Hawaiian Islands. It's neat stuff like that, and it's totally Imagineered from the ground up. I thought it was pretty cool. I mean, it's a nice, and the daycare is phenomenal.
Which island is it on?
It's on Oahu. It's just a half hour west of Honolulu.
That's really funny because, like you said, the big difference between a destination resort and a place that you go to that they dress up to look like a fantastical place. Hawaii has natural beauty and all the things, but you still want to add on, from a Disney perspective, all that Imagineering. And as far as giant evil corporations go, Disney is at least inventive enough and interesting enough. Like, I love Disneyland.
Yeah.
Make no qualms about it. But there are lots of like interesting things that I think Disneyland does to hide the fact that it is giant warehouses, that it makes you feel like you are in a whole separate place.
Yeah.
It's like, so when my wife and I, years and years ago, when she was still working in the travel industry, we went on a Disney cruise when they first started doing like actual ships that Disney always had chartered cruises. And then they built a couple of their own ships that were up to Disney standards. And it reminded me of going to like Disney nightclubs at Disney World. When you go to a Pleasure Island, I think is what they call the adult island, like where all the bars and stuff are in Florida.
Oh.
And you go in and there's a Simpsons episode where they go to the bar that does New Year's every night. And it's just like that. Like you go in, they have a New Year's bar every 90 minutes. But when you have to go to the bathroom, instead of going to the back of the place and there being like a 14-person deep line for a one-stall bathroom, you go in and it's like airport bathrooms, full on like 35 urinals and a bunch of stalls, and it's all pristine and super clean and all that. That's what the cruise was like, which is unusual for cruise lines. Usually, they don't have spacious bathrooms, and they don't take care of that kind of the logistics side.
Amenities and attention to detail.
It was neat.
Sounds like.
Shout out to tested fan Brett, who was kind enough to stop and introduce himself to me at Aulani.
Did you get any perks?
No. I mean, being in Hawaii is kind of a built-in perk. What are you going to do?
Did you leave the resort much, or were you mostly in
that's the thing. Like, it is far enough from Waikiki that you're not wandering out of the hotel to do a whole lot. So Disney's got you, and they got your money. Yeah. But there is this small shopping center across the street, and you can go eat there and shop if you want.
The big wave surf contest was while you were there, I think.
No, I didn't know that.
There was an enormous. It might have been on the North Shore, so it would have been far away, but
that's cool.
Like 35-foot swells and enormous longboards and all that stuff. Yeah,
surfing's cool.
Yeah, Disneyland right now, of course, undergoing a lot of construction for the new Star Wars land.
Yeah, how long is what they have now going to stay? How long is Space Mountain going to remain Star Wars?
I don't know.
Wait, it's Star Wars right now?
Yeah. Yeah,
Hyperspace Mountain. And the whole Star Wars, I don't know, it's like Embrace the Force experience or whatever it's called. Their TV commercial is still going on for it. So definitely, like, they've doubled down on the Jedi Training Academy. They have exhibits with costumes in the films. I mean, you have films come out basically every year now. I think that's going to stay around until the new land opens up.
That's
next year, right? Or year after?
It's got to be longer.
I think it's maybe a little long. I don't know.
What's the right age for Jedi? Like, my first exposure to Jedi Training Academy was through Gary. My daughter is now 3, and we had a conversation the other day about what the right age to go to Disneyland is, and one of the prime motivators for this is I want to make sure we hit her for Jedi Training Academy when like she believes that it's the real Darth Vader that she's force choking.
4.
4
sounds about right.
Do it.
So we got to show Star Wars soon. I guess.
You got to dress her up though. Not every kid gets chosen.
Hell yeah!
All right.
Hey, look, I can make this happen.
And you could bring your own robe.
That's
Bring
true.
your own robe, mill your own lightsaber.
I'm going to shave my head, dress up like Darth Maul,
braid her hair. Does it look like Padawan?
Frank would Darth Maul me, right?
Sure.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? Yeah, get you some horns. Yeah.
It might all be First Order stuff now. Or what is it? New Order? No, it's First Order.
Oh, you mean like the actual stormtroopers?
Yeah.
No, I think it's still OT.
Classic.
There's a lot of First Order stormtroopers in those ads.
I don't know about Jedi Training Academy, but
I know they revised it.
during the age of the First Order, there weren't a lot of Jedi, so it would not be canonical.
That's true.
Right. I guess during the age of Darth Vader, there weren't a lot of Jedi either. So technically, you have to go prequels for Jedi Training Academy to even really work.
This whole system's breaking down.
Yeah.
Breaking through the fantasy.
I hope they are canonical, or people like you are going to stand up and interrupt the show.
Yeah. Excuse me. Who is this character? Darth Vader did not work with Darth Maul.
There can only be one Jedi.
That child there did not memorize all 7 parts of the Jedi oath. Whatever. I don't know. I'm just making stuff up right now. So you were away for about 2 weeks enjoying your real family. Did you follow technology at all and the tech news?
Yes, I did. Of course. I got the addiction. I went to the websites and followed it.
I want to hear your thoughts on the Apple San Bernardino privacy case.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to rehash. I guess you guys spoke about it last week, but I think it's a really interesting discussion. I don't think that it's so black and white as a lot of people want to make it out to believe. I mean, I think it requires a very nuanced debate, and there's good points on both sides. Would you guys agree with that premise?
No.
All right. What about you?
I think it's very clear cut.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So I assume you're both just Apple is.
Look, I think we should just trust the government. Let Imperator Trump do whatever he wants.
Right.
It's going to happen whether we agree or not.
But it's an interesting discussion to be had. I don't know if you guys watched the House committee hearing yesterday. Did you watch some of that?
I did not get a chance to watch it.
It was terrifying.
Do you watch some?
I was listening. It was like in a window in the background while I was doing other things.
Okay.
So I was listening.
Yeah. I was impressed by FBI Director Comey.
Yes.
He seems like he has a grasp on the technology. He's asking the right questions. He's saying this just has to be a discussion. He does suggest that it's in Apple's business interest to promote themselves as privacy advocates, and he's not wrong. It is in their interest.
Government's economical benefits to do the same.
And it's in his best interest to look out for national security and do everything he can. I think that everybody's doing the right thing.
The interesting thing to me. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
You say that, but then there was also testimony that I think I heard, and again, I was listening in the background, so I may have missed something important, that said the NSA and the Department of Homeland Security both came down in favor of no backdoors and real encryption.
I don't know. I haven't heard that.
Okay.
Is that right?
That's what I thought I heard. The two big takeaways for me for that, what I heard was that, and the fact that at one point somebody had to explain to one of the representatives that the cloud was just computers on the internet.
No, the representatives, some of them have a grasp, but some of them do not.
Holy shit!
It's a little comical. It's cute.
No, it's terrifying
because they think that a firewall is a rule that says they have to have their phone secured, and things like that. But it's I think that they're generally, most of them at the hearing anyway, were generally like asking the right questions.
There were.
So regardless of being impressed and also slightly disappointed by the knowledge of some of the law enforcement officials and politicians on the subject matter, what is your personal take? Because
go ahead.
Because you've demonstrated in the past, like you're pretty trusting with Apple and your privacy information and how much information is out there.
I guess I've given in to the big brother aspect. I mean, I kind of assume that Google knows more about me than maybe the government does. And I am trusting of Apple, but your phone is as secure as you decide to make it. There's a lot of steps you have to go through to turn on or not. You can have a four character password if you want to. You don't even have to use Touch ID. You don't have to use any password. But it took me a while to get on that train. I am now relatively secure. My phone, and I do trust Apple with my information. However, it's interesting, as the FBI director put it, that we've always had the ability to serve warrants to access information. You've always been able to get into a house, you open safety deposit boxes, you've been able to do anything the government, that a court, says you should be able to get into, you've been able to do that. And that's been true of data as well, up until recently, where it now appears as though since iOS 8 and 9, the FBI really is incapable of getting inside of that information.
Well, I mean, we've had military grade encryption available to end users for a really long time.
Right.
It just wasn't on by default. That's the big change.
And it's interesting that Apple tried to help them to get the information by getting the phone to back up. If they got to a Wi-Fi access point that the phone would have known, then it would have been able to back up to the cloud. And apparently, if it backs up to the cloud,
And Apple's more than
Then it's
happy.
Apple can do it.
Yeah.
and it's subpoenable because they have the ability already to get that information.
It seems like that's probably going to change on the platform side, though, at some point in the not too distant future.
I also wasn't aware that Apple's defense is that this is the First Amendment argument, which is
Code is
it has been established as speech, and you cannot compel somebody to say something, and nor can you compel them to write code that does not already exist. I thought that was interesting. But yeah, in general, I mean, I do think it's an interesting discussion. Maybe there is a point at which you guys would agree we should be able to get into an iPhone. What if we, hypothetically have the phone that has the codes to the nuclear bomb that is ticking in one of our cities?
Look, I've seen 24. You get Kiefer Sutherland out there. He says it quietly, and then he says the same exact thing again loud, and the guy caves when he starts waving the gun in his face and yelling at him. It works every time.
Right. No. What if it's a child abduction? What about a child something like that? I mean, I would have feelings about that aren't black and white. I would not want to necessarily sacrifice a child or sacrifice a city in order to allow Apple or to secure phones to that extent. I don't know what the solution is.
Which city?
I don't think that it's necessarily putting a back door that the government can have access to everything. I don't know what the solution is, but it is a very interesting and necessary discussion to be had.
I think that the thing that gets me is that the business costs in terms of international sales and international businesses using products that are made in the United States, if we have mandated backdoors, are such that we will no longer be a technological leader. Or a software leader, and the implications of that are really, really bad. I think there is literally no choice on this if we want to maintain any kind of advantage in terms of software and hardware.
I was particularly moved on your point by this cybersecurity professor, Susan Landau. She spoke at the hearing, and her argument was this has always been and needs to continue to be an arms race between technology companies that are securing data and the government who needs to find their own way into it.
Yeah.
Now, it's getting to the point where the government's having a hard time doing that. Again, I guess they were concerned 20 years ago, and we had the same debate then.
I mean, just to be clear, 20 years ago, certain chips and certain algorithms were considered weapons that were unable to be exported out of the country without specific requirements.
Yeah.
So this is when I started at Ars Technica almost 20 years ago, we literally had the same exact conversation about like RSA 64 or some now long outdated encryption technologies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been down this path before.
It's just now everybody's carrying those devices, and it's not just some crazies using PGP.
The NSA, at the time, I'm sure they were concerned, but they've had no problem since then amassing information on people. They've just found different avenues to that information. Right. And so I think that does have to happen again. That's probably the best solution. The argument I'm sure that they will have is that this encryption is too hard to break. And we've gotten to the point where we can't get past it unless we use an electron microscope and open up the case and try to get the bits out, in a way that's almost certain to destroy the actual, phone.
The thing that's interesting about the whole thing to me is that if anybody has the capability to break the type of encryption that Apple's using, it's probably the NSA. And unsurprisingly, they're awfully quiet. So
yeah. And that was brought up.
And they're prohibited from working on American soil, or at least traditionally were. I don't know if that's still the case in the post 9/11 world.
And the FBI director said as much. He said that they have spoken to whoever will talk to them, and implying not everyone will. And certainly the NSA has technology that they would like to keep to themselves.
Yeah.
So after this hearing, though, the encryption hearing, what is the current status of this case? Because the judge made
there was a federal judge,
a different case, though,
in New York. Well, but it was about the All-Writs Act.
That's true.
And so he basically said the All-Writs Act cannot be used to compel Apple to crack this encryption.
So while the discussion is important for the specifics of the San Bernardino case, is that moot?
I'm sorry?
Well, the congressional hearings have nothing to do with the case. The congressional hearings are just about, it's a way traditionally for elected representatives to grandstand in front of the electorate to show that they care about things that are important to potential voters, or occasionally to get actual information that's actionable in terms of making legislation.
Ostensibly, that's it. Like they're deciding whether or not they want to create new legislation.
Yeah.
And both parties, FBI and Apple, are hoping that they will take this into consideration. So. Yeah. there you go. I mean, this could be they want to have the legislation drawn up this year.
I mean, potentially in terms of the court case, though, what will happen is a judge will rule either whichever party loses that will appeal that to the next higher court.
Yeah.
And we could potentially end up with 2 competing rulings from different federal circuit courts
Until it goes to the Supreme Court.
that end up going to the Supreme Court. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Which is a whole other ball of wax now, given the death of Scalia and that kerfluffle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You missed a big 2 weeks.
Yeah. I'm glad to hear that we have different, not directly opposed viewpoints, but that we have different opinions.
I think we all agree that the discussion needs to be had.
Yes.
And hopefully this will get figured out. It probably won't get figured out by the end of this month, which is when Apple is expected to announce new products, new phones in the spring. So everyone's reporting that on the week of March 21st, and this is not yet confirmed, that Apple will have an event to launch not only a new phone, but also a new iPad. Now, this won't be the 5 SE phone. It's actually, now people are calling it the SE Special Edition, possibly phone, that will come out kind of like to replace the gap of not having a 4-inch phone in their lineup, and then also the iPad Air 3.
There is a 4-inch phone though, right? You can still get the
5S, I still believe, on the low end, but that's a low end phone. That's
Right.
the entry level. That's their budget phone.
Did the C phones just go away when the 6 came out?
C phones went away.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. After all their marketing speak about plastic is beautiful and all the design stuff, they decided it was just easier. I don't know why they decided, but
I'm sure it didn't sell very well.
Yeah. And I think it was surprising that they kept the 5S in the lineup and just didn't standardize to 6 and may build a 6C or something. But now it makes a lot more sense if they need to keep those factories open to produce displays for this special edition phone, which the reports say that it's not going to be every year. It's probably going to be an 18 to 24 month product, and to really just get people who still want that 4-inch phone and that form factor, the latest hardware.
And this is presumably something they're going to roll out in an event later this month?
That is the week of March 21st is what everyone's saying.
Okay.
I'm really interested in this phone because the appeal of the 6S, and this one, we don't know if it'll have 3D touch, and I've actually stopped using 3D touch a lot on the 6S, but it's supposed to have the same processor, the same camera system, and probably have better battery life since it's not powering 1080p bigger display.
Are you interested as an observer or a potential user? Really?
Assuming it has the right CPU.
You want a smaller screen.
I want the smaller screen.
How about that?
Yeah, the bigger screen really doesn't. And it's interesting because even if it's a smaller screen, the assumption is that it's the lower resolution sub 720p screen. We're talking about 1134 by 640, I think it was.
The original iPhone doubled?
Yeah, iPhone.
the
stretched,
iPhone 5.
5S.
Okay.
That screen. So we're talking about Apple selling a premium phone because I think they want to sell this not as like the last year model discounted, but as full price phone or with their leasing plans as the alternative to the 6 and the 6S. They sell premium products, have the speed of the new phones, camera of the new phones, but the screen and the form factor of the old phones.
I mean, in full disclosure, the thing I love about the Duke isn't as much the big screen as it is the big screen's battery life, right? Having that all day, never have to worry about the battery ever is really incredibly compelling.
Right. And if it has Touch ID, which, I think it's probably going to have that. And, the better LTE radios, yeah, I think that's compelling because the way I'm consuming data more now on the phone is less. I mean, video for sure, but I think resolution matters a little bit less for that when you're doing streaming over YouTube. But lists, apps within Twitter and stuff like that, and reading stuff on Medium and Slack, and I think I don't need the full 5.5.
Well, everything's optimized for small screens, so you don't need a mid-sized screen. Can we talk about 3D touch for a little bit though?
Yep, absolutely.
I tweeted about this a couple weeks ago, and I was shocked by the response. I expected people to be really upset with me. I think it's actively bad because it's hard to know when you're 3D touching and when you're long pressing. It's something we talked about, I think, before the phone came out, before the 6S and 6S Plus came out. But it's just a bad user experience.
Really?
I think.
I so rarely use it.
I really, really rarely.
I use it by accident when I don't want to use it when I want to do a long press more often.
So when you're moving icons,
when I'm moving icons, or when I'm trying to
copy text,
copy paste is when it almost always pops up. And it is I use my phone as my main computer for email and communication stuff now, because I'm never at home.
I found one good use for it, and that's when you go to forward a photo from your Photos app. It pulls up an email, and you go to the photo picker, or where am I? No, I guess I'm launching the mail app, and then I'm choosing the paperclip, and then I'm choosing a photo.
So you're using shortcuts.
It only gives you the tiles. You can barely see the photos, but you force touch on those and blow them up, so you can actually see the detail in the photo before you attach it.
Yeah,
I like that.
The one I like is Genius Scan, because you can long press and go straight to the camera.
Oh,
for doing a camera scan.
Yeah,
but that's it. Everything else is
and you have
a
to
mess.
use it for playing back live photos. So that's really the only place you have to actively use it.
Oh, that's how you play. I always just swipe back and forth until it plays.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
Swipe back and forth.
So like when you come into a photo, the live photo plays.
Yeah, as it scrolls on the
but
screen.
it doesn't play the entire.
Yeah, it does.
It plays up until the point where it stops.
Yeah.
I thought it just animates a little bit, like the first
It is
half
only a
second.
little bit.
No, you can hold on. Live photo goes.
Oh, you're
like
right. You don't
seconds.
get the
full animation.
You're right. You don't get the full
There's
thing.
more than that?
The live photo is
you
like
live
a whole
touch, yeah.
several seconds.
Yeah,
Have you been not?
because there's the after. Right?
Yeah.
There's the before and after. This just shows you the before.
Yeah, the slight animation when you slide into a live photo in the photo gallery is just to let you know this is a live photo,
yeah.
and then you're supposed to hard press it, 3D press it to get the full animation.
I've never felt dumber in my life.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, how are you supposed to know that if you're a normal human being?
It's in all the advertisements.
I got my phone. After I stopped being a tech reporter, so I didn't read the instructions.
and you got it because you broke the screen on your old phone.
I got it because my wife broke the screen on her old
which you
phone.
could have replaced for $130.
Not in the time frame that we needed.
Oh.
And no, because she didn't have Apple Care on that phone.
You don't need Apple Care. We talked about this last week. It's much cheaper.
Yes, but anyway, okay.
Did you mess with the settings for how hard you have to force touch?
No.
Because that's a thing. That's a slider.
I'll do that. Is it accessibility or something buried?
I reduced mine way down, so it's like I just have to touch very softly.
But now you can't do a long press.
Well, you just hold long. You know.
All right,
It's
this
like-
is fascinating. How
great
for people
radio.
out there, how little you've used the 3D touch. But there's supposed to also be an iPad Air 3 coming out at this event. It won't just be
That's interesting.
a smaller iPad Air. It hopefully will support the pencil.
Yeah, that would
and
be
will get redesigned so it has the 4 speakers set up as iPad Pro.
Well, that'd be nice.
And this could be the one that gets people to. I mean, iPad Pro being the price point it is. I think it's only for a small amount of people. What's interesting is in how well the pencil will work on a screen that's smaller than the iPad Pro screen,
Well, I mean, we both used the Adobe Ink and Slide.
which were not great styluses.
They were good for the time, but nothing compared to the pencil, right? Yeah. The problem I had with that was that without palm recognition, the 8.5 inch by the iPad Air size screen is really hard to use. So I think if they, with the benefit of the pencil, it might actually be good.
All right, and the iPad Air 2 hasn't been updated for over a year, so it's about time for that to happen.
It doesn't need an update. I mean, it's fine. Yeah.
That's all the Apple stuff we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about move on. Now there's some patent information in India. What's going on with there? Someone put that on.
Oh, so the patent information in India was really interesting. They were choosing whether to accept or reject software patents. And software patents in the U.S. are. I was talking to somebody the other day about this at length because I've been investigating the patent situation for the stuff I'm working on, and it seems like software patents are in the way out in general because the way they were typically worked is bad in the U.S. Because the clerks didn't understand the software, you were able to patent things as a software patent that shouldn't be patentable. So the classic example is the Amazon one-click patent, right? Mm-hmm. It's basically a patent for the idea of combining 3 button presses into one, which is something that is if you made a physical item that did that, it would be unpatentable because it isn't actually an invention. It's just a thing that saves a little bit of time in a specific way. And there was a bunch of legal definitions for all that stuff. India is interesting because they were deciding this week whether to accept or reject software patents as an entire class, and they are not going to allow software patents. It seems like in India, which is really, really good news because that means that. It's a seventh of the world's population or more, and it's a massive market. So,
do you think it'll have any stifling of innovation if people can't make money?
it seems like it hasn't been a problem so far. The big problem with software patents is because they approve everything. The only way that it gets worked out, whether the patent's legitimate or not, is in court, which is hugely time consuming and expensive.
The bureaucracy of patents is the thing that stifles innovation way more so than the capital opportunity.
Given rise to patent trolls.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, well, we did talk about products potentially coming out at the end of this month, but something that's out now that could be exciting is the Raspberry Pi 3. Now, Jeremy,
that was interesting.
Super interesting.
I mean, whatever.
What do you mean, whatever?
I mean, I think the Raspberry Pi is great, but I don't know. I'm
Are you in the camp that you're like, you think it's a good idea, but you have no use for it?
No. I'm just not a Linux guy, so I'm more about the microcontrollers, like the Teensys and the Android, and the other guys. But it's super cool. It's twice as powerful as the Raspberry Pi 2, and the Raspberry Pi 2 has been my 3D print server for like a year now.
Two almost.
Has it been 2?
It's been a long time.
So I look forward to doubling the power of my 3D printer.
Yeah, so it's still quad core. The Raspberry Pi 2 had, I think, a 900 megahertz quad core processor.
Exactly.
This one, Broadcom now has a 1.2 gigahertz, still quad core, now 64-bit, so you can run a whole different type of applications. I believe it's a new Cortex A53 chip, so there could be some different power consumption, but at the same price as the Raspberry Pi 2, and now has built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth.
$35, right?
And I think that is
the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth is super cool. That's great.
And typically that's another at least $15 or $20 in the form of a USB dongle, and it eats one of the USB ports on the device.
Not only
the thing.
it's also the space. If you're talking about building a self-contained unit, having all these accessories. Patrick brought in the Raspberry Pi Zero, which is the $5 computer.
really cheap.
Yeah.
But you need to put all these accessories on it to actually get it to be functional.
So do you know, does it have antenna headers, or does it have an antenna built into the board?
It has a built-in antenna. I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a little attachment for your
you can add
duck
an
antenna.
external.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about the Raspberry Pi, I was looking. My daughter asked for a laptop for Christmas, and we had do you get her the toy Leapfrog thing for like $40, or do you actually get like a cheap Chromebook or something like that?
The 3-year-old daughter asked for a laptop.
She wants to pretend that she's working when I'm working on my laptop.
Okay.
Like it's a thing. Asking a bunch of questions ended up with us realizing that she wanted a thing to pretend that it was a laptop, so we could really just go to IKEA and take one of the cardboard things with the empty shells.
Yeah.
But while we were getting to that point, I started looking at what you can buy or build in terms of like an inexpensive laptop. And you can actually buy shells that you plug Raspberry Pis into that have keyboards and monitors and the whole thing. So you can basically build a Pi powered laptop.
That's cool.
And like then just keep upgrading the shell with the new hardware as the new Raspberry Pis come out, which I thought was super neat. Yeah, it was really cool.
Give her some real PC roots.
Print something,
Linux, man.
You've got to be able to print some iPad or some Raspberry Pi cases from Adafruit. I bet you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, or you laser cut them or whatever. But yeah, that's no problem.
I mean, get her involved early. That's what I'm saying. You sit down, show her how the 3D software works.
I mean, that's true.
Maybe just like
print it out.
Get her something. Buy something from C4 Labs.
let her pick the color.
Put the goggles on.
Yeah.
Put in the goggles. Let her sculpt some stuff. We'll call it a day.
I'm interested to know what people are using with the Raspberry Pi 2 or 3 and what you can use. I mean, obviously you can build print servers, kind of single purpose things that need connectivity and need some processing power. Video decoding also is improved
Streaming
now.
boxes.
Streaming boxes.
Is audio better?
I don't know if audio is better.
I didn't hear that.
I know that was always one of the weak spots, although it's easy to buy a $30 USB sound card if you want to use that for a streaming box or whatever.
I mean, it's all about the Internet of Things. I mean, they have this is now going to become the Linux-based Internet of Things hub for all the makers out there. And then there's the Particle Photon, which is the microcontroller version of this, which is like $20.
That came out of the Spark stuff? Is that
it
the same
used
thing?
to be the Spark Core.
Okay.
They changed their company name and came up with a new chip. So it's all out there now. There's no excuse for things to be disconnected.
So I can hook my fridge up to the internet?
Easily.
It's going to make this year's Maker Faire that much more interesting.
Yeah.
All those projects. And all the things around us are getting smarter, including the quadcopters that we get to fly. Announced just this week, DJI has its Phantom 4.
Okay. I got to ask something, Norm.
Yep.
How old now is the Phantom 3?
It's about 1 year old.
It was a year ago?
A little less than a year ago.
Seems like it was just last fall.
No, I had it last summer.
You
I was
expected
flying
to be.
it last summer.
Okay.
You expect DJI to release something every 6 months or more rapidly.
It's been about a year between the Phantom lines. So think about this. The Phantom 2 was 2 years ago.
When did the Inspire come out? We went to that thing for the Inspire last
2014.
summer, right?
the fall of December of 2014.
Oh wow. Okay, never mind. Time flies. Okay, so it's been an acceptable amount of time.
It is still an incredible rate of product iteration.
Yeah.
I won't exactly say innovation just yet. So for people who did buy the Phantom 3 last year, remember last year there were several models, ended up being, I think, 3 models, standard, advanced, and professional, with difference really being on the high end, the video quality, 4K or 2.7K with the software update. This one's just one model. They simplified it, streamlined it.
That's good.
And the big 3 features that are with this model is 28 minutes of battery life.
Wow.
So they're getting close to 30, and they're really confident in that 28. I asked really, it's like 28 and under what conditions, and they're like, and they're averaging 28, and they're saying it can go up to 30 in some tests.
So that means previously it was about 20 or 22 for the
22 for the 3, which like really is 18 to 20.
Okay.
If you're going to get that the battery warning at about 20%.
Howard, didn't 1, 2, and 3 all use the same battery pack? So you
No.
could, oh, really?
You could not swap them between the 2 and 3.
Oh, is that right?
The 1 and 2, I believe, used the same battery. The 2 and 3 looked similar, but the Phantom 3 battery was a 4S battery. So it was a 4-cell higher voltage, 5.4
Because
volt.
I noticed the new battery is considerably wider.
It is. So it's higher capacity, still a 4S battery. The second feature is that now there's a sport mode. So on the transmitter, you can toggle it, and the quadcopter will angle down at 45 degrees and fly up to 45 miles per hour.
It's like ludicrous mode in your Tesla.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
And so the new ESCs on this allow it to be a little more maneuverable. They're calling it similar to the FPV flying experience. So, but the quadcopter is still a relatively big quadcopter, so you're not going to be as maneuverable and doing like flips and tricks, but you'll be able to do like faster figure eights.
How do you toggle that?
It is just a switch on the transmitter.
Okay.
They're making it really accessible.
It can't do flips?
It cannot do flips.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the third thing, which is actually only works in normal mode, not sport mode.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So this is the trick, is computer vision. So it has your sonar sensor on the bottom. So for landing, it has now 2 small cameras downward facing for landing, but there are also 2 cameras that are world facing in the front that allow it to see the world and see obstacles within a 60-degree field of view in front of it.
So as long as you go forward, you theoretically shouldn't be able to smash into anything.
Absolutely.
That's interesting.
And on the Phantom, the camera only faces forward.
That's right.
So
if you're flying forward,
more than likely.
Yeah.
or if you're doing an autonomous flight, so whatever it does, if you do waypoints, or if you, then it's not going to do that flying sideways. If you're flying forward within the 60-degree field of view, it can detect objects up to 15 meters in front of it, and on the screen, you'll actually see like a kind of parking sensor type graph where it'll show you like yellow, 3 bars, 4 bars, and red, and then up to 2 meters. And so if you're flying at full normal speed up against an obstacle, it'll halt if it can't fly around it, or it'll try to fly around it if it's flying autonomously above it. So we tested that a little bit, and it worked. We couldn't fly into flags, for example, a flagpole they had set up on the ground.
What about stuff above and below?
So only 30-degree vertical field of view.
And you said it's 15 meters it can detect. How fast does the quad fly?
The quad actually in normal flight flies slower than the Phantom 3 so that it can catch up.
So like 15 miles an hour?
I want to say, I don't know exactly how many meters per second or miles per hour, but I want to say about 50. Yeah, that sounds about right. 15 to 20 miles per hour.
Before it was like 20, 25 probably.
If we're talking about max speed is 45, then it really seemed like it was like half that, a little less than half that.
Are the down cameras used for object avoidance or just for
landing? Yeah.
Why the new cameras facing down then?
More for stability. So it can track grass better, and
that was the big difference on the Inspire and the 3 compared to the 2, was that you never had those like bouncing landings that you had with the 2.
And they can sort of center themselves without GPS too.
Yeah. So they double number of IMUs and compasses and everything inside this one, so it's even more rock solid. The camera, it's still the same 4K camera and same 4K sensor, but
same as what? Because there were a few.
Same as the Phantom 3.
But there were a few different cameras on the 3.
The cameras actually were the same on the 3, but the software prevented you from encoding.
No kidding.
It was the cooling. because it was 4K encoding on the Phantom 3 Professional because it had the faster chip where they had enabled it to encode 4K video.
So this has that.
Has 4K, yeah.
Okay.
And they redesigned the gimbal system, so it's a lot of it's inside the chassis. And actually has 2 motors, I think, for the vertical gimbal. So everything's supposed to be a little more rock solid. It will record 1080p at 120 FPS, which is cool. I think if you're flying relatively fast, like trying to do those Apple cityscape shots and recording it at 120 FPS and then play it back at 30, then you get really nice like slow city traffic and stuff like that. So that would be neat. And then it'll do subject tracking too. So this actually doesn't use the optical avoidance cameras, and it uses the 4K camera, and it has chips on board now that will do tracking on human shapes. So
Really?
if you drag and select a person, it'll recognize that as a person, and as that person walks around, in an open field, or they say even like through a crowd, it'll recognize it and follow that person.
Wow.
And when it follows, you can then use the transmitter, the stick, to get closer, further back, circle around that person.
But it will always angle or face that person.
and fly.
Yeah.
Also,
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Can you use that information to do things like orbits and stuff like that, or is it just for follow?
So it won't automatically do an orbit.
Okay.
So, but then you can do the orbit yourself. And so that's a demo we did where we had someone walk away from the quadcopter and walk at a slow zigzag.
Like facing the quadcopter or away
From the
Okay.
quadcopter. So, and then I just held the transmitter and then rotate it. And so it was flying around them as they were walking away. And so you're doing an orbit. So it'd be kind of cool for like documentary style shots. So if I'm walking, the quadcopter is facing me and I have a microphone on and I'm walking backwards away from it, it can actually follow me.
Yeah.
And do some slight turns.
And the object avoidance is still engaged with the object
as
tracking?
long as you're flying at the normal speed and not the sport mode.
Yeah.
So they don't list the top speed for the sport mode, but the top speed for they only list the top speed for the sport mode, not the normal mode. Right. It's 20 meters a second for the sport mode, which makes me think if you said it was 10 meters a second, that means they have basically a second and a half to decelerate and not crash into something. If you're like, they must have tuned the top speed in the not sport mode to work within the range and speed of the sensors.
Right. That's why 15 meters. And if you think that that's imagery that they maybe calculate at 30 hertz or 60 hertz, then at that speed, it should be easy enough to slow down and halt once you get within 2 meters. 2 meters is their buffer.
Do you think it's safe to assume that the next version of the Phantom will have cameras on all sides?
That's the thing I asked him. I asked him, why don't you put more cameras? Like the 60-degree field of view for optical avoidance is neat if you're flying forward and gives you some sense of comfort, right? If you're just flying. And their answer was, it's because, humans only look in front of you, but humans also, we don't fly. We don't strafe like a quadcopter does. And a lot of accidents come not when you're flying directly towards something, because you can always see the visual, but moving sideways, or in your case, like moving backwards towards something.
Well, the gate's probably not the cost of the cameras. It's probably the amount of processing power on board the device.
Yeah. So it's going to need, for every additional system, we're talking about six different degrees, 6 different angles that you need potentially avoidance on. That's added cost, added processing, added battery consumption, all of that.
Have they ever gotten into what kind of processors and stuff are on board these things? I assume they're just ARM processors, but
I don't know. We haven't taken them apart yet.
Building custom specialized stuff or anything like that? Yeah, we don't know.
I would imagine that quite a bit of it is customized.
At this point,
probably camera sensors they source out, similar to what GoPro does, but I believe it's probably a lot of it's custom firmware, custom hardware.
Well, yeah, and there's a big difference between doing custom boards and doing custom ARM implementations to accelerate the stuff that they want. Yeah. So that may be the next step to get the number, because then your cost of adding that additional processing is terms of heat and power, not money, which is
So it's $1,400. It'll be out middle of this month. But if you're in the market to buy your first quadcopter, the Phantom 3 got another price discount. So last year's model, I think the Phantom 3 Advance, which over the holidays was $1,000. Now it's I think $800.
Oh wow!
And $800 for a Phantom 3 Advance, which can do 2.7K video and has light bridge and has all that stuff. That's a great deal.
Yeah.
I would get that, I think, over spending $1,400 on a Phantom 4.
Have you flown any of the 3D robotics stuff since we've talked last?
So the Solo still has some issues, and Terry is actually testing the gimbal system now on that for the automatic flight stuff. I think the transmitter was good, and it was comfortable to fly, and it definitely felt like flying as well as flying a Phantom. But the camera stuff wasn't as polished. It wasn't easy.
Software,
plug and play, get all that telemetry. It was more like you're just getting video.
Oh, so it's the same as the higher end Phantom, the higher end 3D robotics stuff, where you have to have one person on flight and one person basically manning the camera.
No, you can do the camera yourself.
Oh, you can, okay.
But it's not as seamless a connection.
Got it. Okay.
So that's out. It's actually going to be in Apple stores too, which is interesting. I think they have a partnership with Apple now. They didn't mention at all like legislation and the state of consumer quads.
We're supposed to register now, right?
You're supposed to register. Absolutely.
What's the penalty if you don't register?
If you get caught, it could be thousands and thousands of dollars. I don't know if someone was flying a Phantom 4, if I'd feel more safe. Just like, oh, they're flying a Phantom 4. They have optical avoidance. Like, I think it's going to give new users, again, the recommendation is if you're a first-time quad flyer, you don't start out with the Phantom class quadcopter.
Right, you get a 250 millimeter quad or something smaller than that.
Something smaller. You start flying, buy a $20 quad, fly indoors, learn that first. And if you get to a point where you're comfortable with that and you're upgrading to a Phantom, at that point, having a 60-degree optical avoidance in front of you is more peace of mind a little bit, but it's not going to be like that's changing how you fly.
And just to be clear, this is the advice that, like, when my dad was like, "Hey, what quad should I buy?" and sent me links to 3 Phantoms last year, I was like, "Go buy." I think I sent him to one of those Hubsan, those mini scales, like it's smaller than a 250, bigger than a Nano. He bought that, flew it for a couple afternoons. Was like, "Oh, that was really fun. I got everything I needed to out of the $75 or $100 quad, rather than the $1,000 or $1,500 quad."
I think the object tracking stuff might actually be more compelling though to use.
The subject tracking stuff, and there is actually some updates that get passed down to the P3. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but the subject tracking stuff, it's gonna be in the app. You're able to select someone. It didn't work perfectly in our little hands-on test. It lost tracking of me when I walked toward the sun, the glare, and
that makes sense.
That blocked it. But again, I think that's gonna make like filming stuff really cool and really easy.
For sure.
Has anybody done a story explaining how Apple captures those screensavers for the new Apple TV?
Don't they just outsource that stuff?
No, they do outsource it, and there have been a bunch of interviews. The people who are hired to do it, I think, did a podcast with Twit about it, and it's a combination of helicopter shots and drone shots.
And I assume that they're shooting like a really high resolution at a really high speed, because like, you can see that the cars are moving slow and stuff like that. Yeah,
they're shooting at least 120 FPS, and they're definitely shooting at 5K, and then they crop down.
Okay,
for a little bit more stabilization.
Okay,
but it's amazing how far. Like I think the London one is probably the most impressive because it goes down the Thames and it goes like basically over the entire city.
I mean, I'm seeing new ones still, which is interesting. The one that flies over Central Park toward downtown is amazing.
So in the Apple TV, you can toggle how frequently you want to check for new ones.
Oh, really?
They download new ones on a regular basis, and you can check and enable disable.
How do you see other cities? I thought it only showed you your city.
No, it shows you others. It's more the time of day is what it shows. So it'll show. I think they have like an array of like morning ones, afternoon ones, and evening ones, and once it runs out of like your local ones, and it'll play the other cities.
There's a few weeks ago a foggy Golden Gate Bridge one popped up. It's really nice.
There are 2 Golden Gate Bridge ones. One flies from city to North Bay, and one flies from North Bay into the city, and both of them cross the Golden Gate. It starts on one side of the bridge and ends on the other side.
You guys have been studying your screensavers.
I leave it on the background. It's actually a fun thing to leave on if I'm like reading or.
It's a dopey thing to say is your favorite thing about anything, but it's I think my favorite thing about the Apple TV.
And we said this in a review, like it sounded like a really gimmicky, anyone could have done this feature, but it ends up being actual like experiential thing that enhances the day-to-day use.
Okay, I'd much rather see that than a bouncing Roku logo flying around. And it turns off after the right amount of time too. Like it turns off after like 4 or 5 minutes, so you don't leave the TV on too long, which is nice.
Well, we might not be trusting Phantoms just yet, and I think I agree with Jeremy. I want to see a Phantom next year or in years in the future with more optical sensors and avoidance sensors, but we may be too trusting of robots in general. Georgia Tech did a research study where they built an emergency guide robot that was built to fail. So they did a study where they put participants in a room with a robot and simulated an emergency, and the robot gave it directions on what to do and follow the robot. And then the robot then was programmed to give bad instructions that could potentially put the subjects, the participants, at risk, and people still followed instructions.
I love it.
Always trust the machine, Norm. That's the rule, right?
I think there's definitely the sense that as a consumer or as when there are institutional things in place, there's like a inherent trust you put into it. They must have tested this. They must have gone through everything. It's better instead of having to make decisions at high stress moments, trust the machine. And maybe you shouldn't.
I want to know more about the study. How were the people instructed to follow the machine?
Yeah. Did they put them in the room and say, hey, just do what the robot says?
So there were 42 volunteers, and many of them were college students, so people you assume to be pretty savvy and smart. And they asked them to follow this brightly covered robot, which looks like a trash can on wheels. And the robot had the word emergency guide robot on the side. The robot then led the subjects into a conference room, and they completed a survey and blah, blah, blah. And they weren't told about the nature of the test.
So the emergency was a surprise.
Yes.
Okay.
And then in some cases, the robot, which was actually controlled by a hidden researcher, led the volunteers into the wrong room and traveled in a circle twice before entering the conference room. And then, so it failed in certain ways. And then once the subject was in the conference room, the door closed, the hallway in which the participants entered was filled with smoke, which set off a smoke alarm. So that's the emergency. Right. And then when the test subjects opened the conference room door, they saw the smoke, and the robot, which had lights and arms, served as pointers. The robots then pointed the subjects to exit toward the smoke and not toward the exit.
Okay.
Followed.
Let's have a pop quiz. If you are in a high-rise office building or like a school building and you see smoke in the hallway outside your classroom, what are you supposed to do?
I don't know the answer to that.
If you're in a high-rise building and you see smoke,
these are two different things. If you're in, say, a 3-story, like a typical university classroom, like a 25, 30 person classroom, you're in class, you get up at the end of class, the fire alarm goes off, you look out through the glass door, or you feel the door and it's warm. What are you supposed to do?
You don't open the door.
You don't open the door. You definitely
don't open the door.
Feel underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want backdraft.
You don't want backdraft. Yeah, you don't want the windows to blow out and Kurt Russell to get sucked out of the building.
That's right.
If you're in a high rise, what are you supposed to, I don't like these are like we were taught what to do in houses and schools and workplaces, but we never taught what to do in high rises because I grew up in Tennessee. Right. They were like the tallest building was 3 stories. So it wasn't really an issue. You could just jump out the window. What are you supposed to do in a high rise if there's a fire? Are you supposed to wait for help, or are you supposed to get down on your hands and knees and crawl through the smoke filled hallway and try to stay low?
Depends how high the high rise is.
You got to use your judgment.
See, that's the problem.
Trust the robot. Trust the authority figure. So the test really here, the study illustrated that the robots, because they were instructed to follow the robots, became the authority figure. And even though the robot wasn't, humanoid or super smart, the assumption is that the robot knew what to do.
I'm willing to bet that the emergency didn't seem that catastrophic, and the people thought this is fun. Look at this trash, this trash compactor. We're supposed to do what it says. Okay, it says go towards the smoke. Come on, everybody. I bet it didn't seem that scary. I'm just guessing.
And there was a limit to what the people would believe. It wasn't like if the robot had rolled into the fire, people weren't going to follow that.
Like if the robot told them to pin one of their own members down to the floor because he started the fire, I bet they wouldn't have done that.
I don't know.
I bet if they instructed them to dial 911, I don't know.
This is kind of an extension of the trusting the authority studies, right? Because that's what this is. You assume that the robot is programmed to be smart and know what's going on. So it's an authority figure, and people are naturally inclined to trust authority figures.
Yeah, no, it's true. Is it the Stanford Prison Experiment or?
Yeah. We always mess this up. It's the Milgram Experiment or the Stanford Prison Experiment.
Documentaries on both out right now.
Yeah.
We're not talking docudramas or whatever they're called, biopics.
Hey, did you see that Google's self-driving cars had their first?
Oh yeah, that's not
first. That's right. Not person. Yeah, first crash.
Yeah,
that was their fault.
Nothing to do with Google's Boston Dynamics robots being bullied. The new Atlas platform.
We talked about that last week.
Yep. But they reported that there was an incident.
Yeah, very low speed impact. I guess one of their self-driving cars, was going to make a right turn. There were some sandbags in the way, so it had to renegotiate. It was going to pull around the sandbags back into the left. There was an oncoming bus that was moving very slowly, like,
less than 15 miles an hour, I think they said.
And the driver and they think the car assumed that the bus would let them in. The bus did not.
No, the car went anyway.
Yeah, the car went anyway. And like a 7 mile an hour
It was a Lexus.
accident.
It
wasn't one of
wasn't
the
the pod
bubble
cars.
cars.
It wasn't the Panda car.
No.
It was one of the Lexus ones with the LiDARs.
With a driver who
Yeah.
just wasn't driving. Yeah.
So the interesting thing about this, there's a Google blog post. It was in there, like they do a regular report about the status of self-driving cars, and they describe the incident. It was in one of those situations where you're turning right onto El Camino Real, I think is what they said, which is a 4-lane undivided highway with stoplights.
Yeah.
That goes down the peninsula. And it was in a situation where normal human drivers usually put two cars parallel in the rightmost lane when you're merging in, and then it kind of works itself out. And it's just like it's not a law situation. It's just the way people drive. And the update from Google was, look, we have to be better at driving the way normal humans drive.
Following the social norms.
We have to follow the social norms. Exactly.
Yeah. And
Well, it sounded like the human assumed the same thing as the car.
right.
And the
So
bus assumed the same thing as the human.
if you're the Google test driver, like, are you at that point, if something's happening, you have maybe like 2 seconds to react. Are you interested in getting the data, or are you let it happen, or do you like, oh no, got to take command and swerve out of the way?
I wonder which was the one that gets them yelled at, right? Like, is it bad to crash the car? Is it worse to crash the car, or worse to lose the opportunity to see what the computer was going to do?
Right. The data could have been important. I mean, this is a real world test case. It wasn't in their controlled environment. It was on public streets. It was on Valentine's Day also.
I mean, we've all been almost hit by a bus in San Francisco, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It happens every day.
Now it's interesting to think in the future the bus would have been controlled by a computer too, and they would have communicated, and this would have never happened.
Well, assuming they run the same software, assuming the bus isn't an Android bus.
But eventually
Or an
there'll
Apple
be a
bus.
common protocol, and all vehicles will be communicating with each other.
I like
But-
that optimism.
But we have to get through this period where only some cars are sentient.
Do you really think that
We
there'll
need
be
the cars to follow the Android motto together, not the same. Unity in the self-drive in the cars, unity among automobiles.
I mean, do you really think that there'll be a protocol that works across all devices and
think
is
it-
infallible?
I
think
not
they have to
infallible,
fall
but I
back.
think that there will be some mandated protocol that they must all abide by. Yes, that will be.
You think that should have back doors or not so much?
And the driver of this car, the quote-unquote driver, the operator, had to file an accident report. So it was, and that's gonna be that sucks.
So does this
It
count
wasn't
as-
my fault. It was
It
the
was the
car's
car.
fault. Oh, I gotta file the accident report.
But hold on, do the points go on that driver's license, or I thought
good
all
question.
of Google's cars shared one license, so that they're I could be completely wrong on this.
What do you mean, one license plate? What do you
But
mean?
no, I thought in terms of like you have points on your license when you have moving violations,
Yeah.
right? I thought that all of the Google self-driving cars are licensed as the same person from a points perspective.
That's weird.
Probably doesn't count as a moving violation at 17 miles an hour though.
yeah, I don't know. That sucks to have to go to driving school.
Did Sergey have to show up for traffic school?
I don't think so.
Did they send the robot?
No.
One of those little pod cars rolls up to the online learning thing, fills out all the classes.
No.
Okay.
All right. From Google to game consoles, updates coming to both, or actually to the PlayStation mostly. You'll soon be able to stream your PS4 to your PC or Mac. It's an update coming.
This is awesome. Does this mean they're also going to have dedicated drivers for the PS4 for the DualShock 4 on the PC and the Mac?
I hope so.
Because that would be nice.
Yeah. I mean, it's Bluetooth. It should be the simplest one to run with no dongle.
Yeah. The streaming thing is great. Like, we tested that PlayStation TV last year, which they canceled in
killed
Japan
it.
this week.
Yeah.
The games were a shit show on that. But the nice thing about it was you could hook a DualShock 4 up to it and stream your PlayStation 4 games to it. But it only had 2.4 gigahertz 802.11n networking, which, at least in my neighborhood, is almost unusable for high bandwidth video streaming and low latency video streaming.
No Ethernet jack?
It has an Ethernet jack, which was great. It worked great over Ethernet, was terrible over Wi-Fi, at least for me. So, like, the fact that you'll be able to do that on your Mac with 802.11ac is or PC is really nice. It's exciting.
And this kind of update is like exactly the kind of stuff that we've been hoping for to come out of both Sony and Microsoft. These software updates that enhance the features of the consoles as people have been using them for a couple of years.
It'll be interesting to see if this telegraphs some VR support, so you can play your games in a virtual room in PSVR.
Right, if they're already doing the encoding. And
maybe it's like some satellite VR client.
Well, I mean, both the PlayStation and the Xbox have hardware H.264 encode, so there's no reason they can't do that.
So that's what they're probably using for this.
It's just the Wii U that misses out on that stuff.
Now, aside from software updates, things that you can't do on the consoles today are hardware updates, but that might change in the future. So Phil Spencer, head of Xbox, indicated that they're looking at ways to not lock consoles into both hardware and software platforms.
It has that. The Xbox has that a port on the top, doesn't it? The Xbox One, or is that just the old ones?
I don't know if the new one.
I thought there was a place like a big fat looking data port on the top of it. Look, hardware upgrades for consoles have traditionally been a total shit show, right? The Ars Technica story about this had a Sega Genesis 32X jammed on the top of an Xbox One. That didn't work out so well for Sega.
Right. I mean, Nintendo had the memory chip for the N64, I believe.
But that was a pack in with games, though. Like if you had a game that required that, they just packed it in with the game.
Yeah. And you could consider, PSVR or Kinect. Those are technically hardware upgrades. If we're talking more fundamental upgrades, I mean, you've been able to upgrade storage for a long time.
Well, at least on the Sony side.
What are the hardware upgrades that really are going to change platform-wise over time?
GPU, CPU, memory.
GPU is crazy. That's like the bulk of the cost. GPU, CPU, memory. I mean, at that point, it is not really a console.
But, I mean, you do make a good point. The PlayStation is theoretically at least going to have external graphics. I mean, it's not theoretical at this point. I think they've said there's external graphics on the PlayStation. There's an external box.
There's a box. I don't know what the box does.
Doesn't that cause a huge chicken and egg problem for developers? I mean, who's going to have who do you support?
The tools are better for that stuff now. So you just have more fog on the or your depth of field shader starts closer to the camera on the
is that compelling enough to upgrade your memory then or your GPU? Well, if it's just going to get you more fog.
Okay, look at the case of the PlayStation VR. That gives you a whole new capability that wouldn't exist otherwise.
So that's an external box.
And the external buses are now fast enough that you can do graphics outside the box, theoretically at least. So, I mean, maybe that is maybe it isn't a bad idea. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, people are billing it as making the consoles more like PCs, and I don't think that's the case. It's not going to be opening up your console and swapping out motherboards and putting RAM inside, or even hard drives, as you've been able to do in the past. I think it's going to come in the form of using external buses, like, with bundle. I mean, and I think if they were to do it, it would be done in a way that they would have a slew of games. They'd be launching platforms, essentially. Like, here's the Xbox with the new experience, also with 10 games launched, and you buy the games and the thing, and then so they have a guaranteed user base.
If you look at it like in terms of a PC, if you bought a PC 4 years ago and put a new video card in it last year, you still have a pretty good PC. Like somebody on our Oculus yesterday posted their Steam VR performance test, and they were great with what looked like a 4-year-old CPU that was a quad core and a brand new video card. Do you think that this is partly Xbox hedging because they're worried that VR is actually going to hit? Like, do you think that they're looking at the Xbox One as a platform that is incapable of running VR applications that are being developed for at least the Rift and the Vive?
If that's the case, that would mean that they don't have no solution right now, and they're not working on something, and that would be then it's already too late.
Well, that's true.
It doesn't matter. They can catch this on the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, let's see what Nintendo does.
Nintendo is not going to do VR. They've walked down this path before.
That's what I'm saying. Let's see what Nintendo does, and if they find something that is actually compelling and it becomes on the console side, whatever Nintendo's doing versus PSVR versus more traditional core gaming on Xbox, then that can determine, what Microsoft wants to do with its next Xbox.
Are you positive that the NX will not have VR capability?
No, nobody's positive.
Okay.
That doesn't work in Nintendo. But Nintendo, that would be chasing in a way that, like, everything that Nintendo's telegraphed about NX so far implies that it's a mobile thing that you can also play games on the TV, or maybe a TV thing that you can also play games on mobile. Mm-hmm. Right? It's more joining their two existing platforms, not something that's a wild departure from what they've done in the past. You are talking about NX Norm,
Yep.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I don't. I
Which
think,
we're hoping to get announcements for sometime this year.
well, I mean, they said it would be this year, presumably E3 or GDC, right?
I would hope at least E3 at the very latest.
Didn't they? Wasn't there something a couple weeks ago about their financials saying that there was going to be news like that was going to come out this year?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Have you guys been looking forward to playing Quantum Break?
No. What's Quantum Break?
It's a Xbox. It's actually launching on Windows 10 next month and coming out for Xbox. But it's a shooter. I believe it's by the developers who did Alan Wake. Yeah. It's their new game, and they've been working on it for a long time. And it has FMV sequences, like lots of live video shot produced things with Sean Ashmore and the dude from Game of Thrones. And
Sean Bean?
No. Baelish, I think, from Game of Thrones. But it has a lot of live sequences. Those are not going to be bundled on disc. They're going to be streamed. Online connectivity required.
Why is that?
To save on the install and the download. Well, I think makes a lot of sense.
And if you don't have internet, that just skips them.
No, it probably doesn't work.
It probably doesn't work. Yeah.
This game doesn't make any sense at all to me.
Where's the story?
That's crazy. So this is the other game. This is the game. There was a big kerfluffle a few weeks ago when they said they were going to release it on Windows 10 and it was supposed to be an Xbox exclusive, and the Xbox fanboys lost their minds over. Right?
That's the one.
Yeah. These are the people that made Max Payne.
They made Max Payne. They made Alan Wake. I hope. I think it has like some.
What do you mean? Remedy made Max Payne.
It's Remedy.
This is Remedy.
This is Remedy.
Or it's the people that became Remedy, that left Remedy and became something else.
No, I think it is.
Is Remedy ass Remedy?
I'm pretty sure it's Remedy ass Remedy, because it's not the Max Payne 3 Rockstar people.
Man, people always yell at me when I come on the podcast and talk about video game stuff over here. It's not good. I'm looking it up.
Quantum Break is the name of the game.
I am excited about Quantum Break. Then I apologize. It's a little bit of a name. Yeah, it is Remedy Entertainment.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. It's only through the Windows 10 store. And PC Perspective had a thing yesterday that said there's actually performance differences in the Windows 10 store in games that come through the Windows 10 store because they have to support certain APIs that don't actually give you things like VSync or the ability to turn VSync off. So if you have a big, giant, beefy gaming PC and you want to run it faster than the refresh rate of your monitor, or have one of the unlocked the frame unlocked monitors, you can't actually use those with games that come through the Windows 10 store. So that makes me think this is probably a game I'll play on the Xbox.
More reason to buy stuff on the Windows Store, not.
So have you guys bought anything on the Windows Store?
I don't think I've downloaded things via the Windows Store, like we talked about when you mentioned that app.
Plumbago?
Is that Plumbago, the drawing app?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good, right?
Yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, I thought it was neat.
I was not entirely sure there was a Windows Store until just now. So,
Okay.
No. Didn't know that.
Good to know.
I don't know.
Well, there is. Let's go through the rest of some news. DisplayPort 1.4, the specs were announced. It will support 8K 60 hertz. Now you might ask, when is 8K video going to come out, since we're barely just getting 4K video? Well, I believe 2020 Olympics will be recorded and broadcast in 8K.
Is that right?
Because it's going to be in Japan, and they are on the forefront of 8K.
Does that mean it's 8K for video or 8K for desktop? Like, is there an 8K video spec now?
I believe it is an 8K video spec.
So this is going to replace HDMI beyond 4K?
Yeah.
Presumably.
Yeah.
Okay.
On the PC side, it will work over USB-C, so that would be nice. And then other things. A couple weeks at TED, one of the augmented reality headsets that was shown there was called the Meta 2.0, and they finally announced more details on that, including pre-orders for the dev kit. It's $950. Will come out at third quarter of this year. Now, the headset itself is not a computer, not like HoloLens, which, speaking of which, $3,000 for the pre-order. If you want to get it,
you can get it now.
30th. You can pre-order now and get it by the end of this month.
I didn't pre-order.
No, Will didn't pre-order. But the HoloLens has, I believe, a 30-degree horizontal field of view, and the Meta has a 90-degree field of view. It uses two 1280 by 1440 displays, so total combined resolution is 2560 by 1440.
What's the vertical, do they say?
They did not say vertical, but just 90-degree horizontal. And then it also has gesture tracking like the HoloLens does. Still a developer device. And of course, we're all waiting for Magic Leap to say something.
There was a post on our Oculus this morning that showed somebody using Elite Motion to track your fingers on a 3D modeled keyboard in VR. So you basically was able to detect your keyboard. You told it, I presume, what model keyboard you had, and it then showed you an accurate representation of that, and you could see your fingers as you were typing on it, even when you had the goggles on. That's magic.
Yeah, have you guys talked about the Orion update to
You know,
Leap Motion?
I can't find our Leap Motion.
I bought one.
You did for the sale.
Because for the Orion update. Actually, no, before the sale. You can get them for like $30.
Yeah, they did a sale on Leap Day this year, but you can get Leap Motion, and everyone gets the Orion update. It's just a software update. Again, when we were talking about Leap Motion a while ago, we knew it was all software. It was computation and software. The technology just needed to be proven by that.
It's an IR camera.
Yep.
And I guess they pivoted a couple years ago to become VR, a technology company. They used to put it on the desk, and now it's made to be mounted right on a headset.
That's right, which is what's cool, and hopefully that will be built into some VR stuff.
Presumably, I'm looking at that Pre over there. There's a space for it right in the middle in the front that you could just glue it on there.
No, that doesn't obscure any of the sensors.
So the Orion update's pretty cool. I downloaded it right away, and it's much more accurate. It's still fallible. You can still obscure your fingers and things like that, but it's pretty awesome. It adds bones for the arms that didn't used to be there, and you can mesh your fingers together. I can imagine typing on a keyboard is something you could possibly
Would you describe it as working?
Yeah, I would. The thing
a big improvement over what it was when we tested it.
It's still, you lack any kind of feedback when you touch something. So that's the biggest problem with the experience of it. So when you grab a cube, like you just kind of have to imagine you're grabbing a cube and you can see it, but you can't feel anything. The thing that works really well is things where you wouldn't naturally feel something. So you can do a thing in their tech demo where you create a cube by putting your fingers together and then stretch them apart. And then if you can make it be a weightless environment by moving your hands up like this. And so you can throw the cube out into the space, and that is fun. So
that's interesting.
Things where you don't expect to get any kind of tactile feedback, they're very successful. I could imagine it making a good interface for that.
We'll talk a little more about that when we get to the VR Minute. Last couple of things. Scott Kelly made his triumphant return after a year in space. He landed safely yesterday or 2 days ago for you guys, back on the ground, and he says he's ready to go back up. He would go back up if he needed to, but that information, they're studying the differences in his body versus in his genome versus his twin brothers, and that will help us. It's the next step toward getting us for a long-term Mars mission, which would be more than a year in space.
It's specifically they're specifically looking at genome differences. It's funny, they were ramping up to work on this when we were in Houston to do the food segments and the stuff with Terry at the pool and all that. Was that 2013? It was right after my daughter was born, so it must have been 2013. Yeah.
Right.
It's amazing. I mean, it's a whole lot of science is going to come out of that.
I wonder
if
he's biologically a little bit younger now, since he spent time away than his brother from a gravitational field like planet Earth.
Huh? Few microseconds.
Yeah,
maybe. We'll plug him into the death clock, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know exactly how that works. Yeah, it's all fascinating stuff. We're glad he's home. It got some press, but it's still like we haven't had the same kind of celebrity astronaut that with the same impact in the mainstream media as Chris Hadfield. And everyone's doing these great videos. It's a combination of the likability and the stuff he was doing, but I think he just hit that social media, that point at the right time with the right content.
Yeah.
He's a good communicator.
The affability of a Canadian and amazing communication skills.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of ISS stuff, though, IMAX has an upcoming documentary. There's a trailer out for it now, which is pretty cool. It's a lot of footage they shot, I think, with those red cameras. They're going to use in this documentary.
Like on orbit, they shot presumably.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's cool.
Did Scott have to do? Was his return process markedly different than it normally is after a 6-month tour?
I don't think it was.
Did they because they usually people have to get stretchers and help out of the Soyuz and all that stuff, but presumably since he was there for twice as long as normal, he's going to have I know that he has exercises he has to do for the next 45 days at least, and they're going to monitor his progress in Houston. I think he's on his way back now, so hopefully he sees family tonight for the first time in a fairly long time.
All right. We're not going to let's not play a musical cue. I do want to thank the sponsor of this week's episode of This Is Only a Test, and that sponsor is Slack. If you guys don't know what Slack is, we actually have talked about it a lot and use it. It is a messaging app for teams. Think of like before years ago, you would use IRC clients, and that's how you create groups or instant messaging or email. Slack combines all of those features into one app and service. You have it for your desktop, it runs on your phone, and you can create channels, and teams use it for all sorts of stuff. People build communities out of it. If you go to events, people then form Slack communities, Slack channels. You can integrate with Google Docs, Dropbox, so you can copy links. You can create stuff. It's more than just your IRC chat window. We use it. I know, Will, you use it?
I use it every day. I actually have the window open right now. We use it. The thing that I like is that you can integrate it with the other services that are important for your business, everything from like performance metrics to things like GitHub, so that when we do a push, everybody gets a notification, a link to download the build. We can all try it out. It's really good, especially for my guys. I have a small distributed team where we're all over the world, and it makes it like I don't know how we would run the business that I'm running right now without a tool like Slack.
And even if you're not running a business, if you're running let's say a Rocket League team, you could just set up a Slack group, Slack channel. It's free to set up for your team. And if you go to slack.com/onlyatest, like this is only a test, and create a new team, you'll get $100 in credit if you decide to upgrade to a paid plan. Supporting them supports us, and it's actually an app and service that we use and like. So thank you, Slack, and thank you guys for listening to this episode of This Only Test. And now it's time for
The VR Minute. Virtual reality this week.
All right, here's the VR Minute. Isn't it nice to hear that, Jeremy, back from being away for 2 weeks?
I hope those are loud enough for your listeners because they're a little soft in my headphones.
Now, you know what? I'll play it again with the audio bumped up. How about that?
No, it's okay.
No, okay, all right. So it's the VR Minute. Since we chatted last, we had Vive pre-orders go up on
Vive
February.
pre-orders?
No, Vive pre-orders.
That's confusing.
Vive
Pro orders.
Consumer Vive CV1.
Did anybody figure out what the difference between the pre and the shipping?
Yeah.
Like what's changed?
Slightly different head strap.
That's it?
No.
It had to be something
There's
else,
more
right?
than that?
I bet it's not that. I don't think that is even a difference.
No, the
It
head
is a
strap's
difference.
changed. But I know that there's some talk about like binning panels versus like bringing costs down. I've been using a pre now for a couple weeks. I can't see anything that would preclude you from shipping that as a product.
Yeah.
Could be radios. Could be like reliability in some of the wireless radio systems.
That's true. Could be battery problems. Could be screen defects.
I mean, we assume that they made several thousand of the pre's because everyone who got a Vive first development kit,
I think.
right? They sent everyone one of those and decided not to sell them. So either something wasn't ready on the software side that they wanted to push to April 5th, which is when the Vive CV1 is shipping.
Oh, really? They announced that?
They announced April 5th. Or maybe it was a liability issue. Who knows?
Could be a
Regardless,
manufacturing problem.
the Vive Pre is essentially functionally the same as what the CV1 is going to be. So good for everyone who got in on the pre-orders. Did you pre-order, Jeremy?
I did. I got up at 6:45 in order to do so because it was early, man, 7 a.m. And got in on that. I watched the countdown go down. And then I don't know how you pre-ordered, but I had to go to the Steam app and go through that.
Oh, really?
Through the Steam app.
Yeah.
It was just on HTC.com.
yeah.
I
That's where
went
I
there,
went.
man. It went to 0, and it did. I refreshed. Nothing happened. I waited a minute, and eventually I just went over to Steam.
Well, so the good news is it seems like it took them a while to run through their pre-built allocation, because I just got an email this morning that said, hey, the pre-orders, like they're shipping in May now.
Yes.
Oh, is that right?
So if you got in, I think they said they sold 15,000 in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Which is a good amount. It's good for VR and good for the expectation of how many they made. If it took them more than a day then to to get to the May as opposed to April ship date. So hopefully they made a lot of these, and everyone who ordered, maybe let's say within the first hour, is going to hopefully get them that first week.
Isn't Oculus now shipping July new orders?
It is.
So,
They are.
Ouch.
Yeah, so maybe we don't know what their production rate is like. Vive, of course, they have to make the controllers as well and put those in. So maybe they've had more lead time. Because keep in mind, if we assumed the Vive Pre or the whatever the Vive Pre ended up being, that was on track for a December end of year release, because that's what we announced last year, then they could have had a much longer lead time in terms of production and getting stuff ready.
And what the partnership with HTC gets Valve is that manufacturing pipeline.
That's right.
So they had lots of experience going into that.
I do want to talk about the Vive Pre a little bit, since we do have a Vive Pre in office now. But Oculus also announced a new game. Palmer teased it for a little bit last week, but it's Lost Cities VR. It's
Pokemon's, right?
It's a board game. It's a VR tabletop game.
Oh, it's not a card game?
It's a card game.
Okay,
It is.
it's a card game.
Like in the sense that it is a virtual reality analog for a traditional game you play on desktop.
Right.
Does it have like rule management and stuff like that, or is it just a bunch of cards and a table that you can throw at people? Or I presume since it's coming out early.
There's a trailer you can watch.
Oh, you can? Okay.
Yeah, but I was kind of surprised at the lack of in-your-face kind of depth. You know, it's all out away from you. It seems like it would be an interesting experience. I gather that they're playing it a lot in-house, and it's probably very fun. But I kind of just imagined all of these initial VR games to be experimenting with things that are a little closer to the viewer.
Well, there's a sweet spot, right? There's
Absolutely,
a sweet spot from like 18 inches away to, say, when you start focusing to infinity, which is a couple meters.
And you know what? There's two games, actually. I got confused. There's Lost Cities, which is a Gear VR game that was announced, which is a board game. But the one that got the big news is Dragonfront.
This is the thing that's
Dragonfront
like,
is the thing that's like Pokemon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's an existing universe, but they liken it to Hearthstone, but in VR.
Smart.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that's a bold statement, because Hearthstone is a pretty incredibly huge ranging game.
What do you mean?
At this point? Well, like millions of people play Hearthstone. They've expanded it a lot. It's getting to the point that they're having to like retire old cards and stuff like that. Like, if you're saying, coming out and saying, hey, I'm making a thing that's like Hearthstone, is kind of like Blizzard coming out and saying, hey, I'm making a thing that's like Magic the Gathering, which they explicitly did not. And that, anyway.
Well, I think the developers, what they did was they created a new game, and they said they made a physical version of the game to test out what the physical mechanics would be like, and then adapted it for VR. And there are a lot of things like when you play a physical board game that you don't, or CGG or whatever, that you don't want to have to do shuffling and stuff like that. And so all that's automated, and that's great. But the idea of the pace of it and what it's like to play 1v1 with someone against you, like that kind of Pokemon style, that all translates, I think, really well to virtual reality.
Especially on a game that's not about bluffing or lying to people, so you don't need to translate facial expressions and stuff like that. When it's just here's a game that like Netrunner would be a great game to play, I think, in VR. But anyway,
so this is coming out, I think, exclusively for Oculus. It is an Oculus Studio game, so
not Gear VR.
Funding.
How about that?
So this one, and there's been some, I don't know, I don't want to call it controversy, but some discussion online about Oculus exclusive games and
vice versa.
What's going and yeah, exactly. I don't think anything's. I mean, obviously for HTC, the room scales games and controller games aren't going to come out for Oculus
until touch
touches it out, right? So that is a timed exclusive at the very least. But on Oculus side, there are games that, from Oculus's perspective, wouldn't exist if they didn't help support it or help develop it or provide dev kits for it. So a lot of things that have been announced so far, I don't have the exact list, but we'll definitely get more closer lists as we get to GDC. Those are going to be Oculus only.
So, what's the argument? Are people upset that there are games that exist only for Oculus but not the Vive?
Yes, but specifically there are some games, I think, for example, Drift.
It's Adam's Orth. That's his Twitter name. I don't think it's his actual name. He's the guy who made the first Endless Runner.
Yeah, the Microsoft guy. He was the one who said deal with it with the Xbox and then left and then made his own VR game.
That's him.
Yeah.
Oh.
Google it.
I thought he was the cannibal guy.
Fact check this for me.
I follow him on Twitter.
But anyway, when he was making that game, I think he had said it's going to be available for all platforms. And then the rumor, or what people are assuming happened, is that Oculus came in and provided support and money, and then they locked it into a platform only.
Okay, so I got Adam Orth and Adam Saltzman confused. Adam Saltzman is the cannibal guy, and Adam Orth, you're right, is the Drift guy. I get Adrift and Tacoma mixed up.
Yeah, they're both space station games and kind of first-person experiences, FPXs.
Yeah.
But I think Adrift is more of like the gravity because you're in VR.
Got it.
You're like solving a mystery about what happened.
I can understand why people would be upset. They're spending a lot of money on one of these platforms because nobody in their right mind is going to get both unless they're at this table, and they want to be able to play everything. And I don't blame them. However, I also understand that the corporation spent money, and this is to promote their platform. So I get it. I get both sides.
I mean, it's like if you buy a PlayStation, you aren't upset that you can't play. Well, okay, that's a bad example. If you buy a PlayStation, you don't get upset that you can't play Halo on it because Microsoft owns Halo and they paid for the development of those games.
But you understand why they would want to. That's all I'm saying. They want to.
Well,
If they have the technical capability. It's not they both run on PCs. It's not that they're.
I mean, I guess that's true.
It's not like they're designed to run on different hardware.
That's the difference.
But even let's think about it this way though. Let's say a company like Crytek, and again, speculation about what happens. Crytek has an Oculus Studio game, The Climb, right? And the climbing game feels like a game that would work best with track controllers, hand controllers.
It's true.
The Climb is coming out with the Oculus without the touch controllers and Oculus, and so they had to spend time and resource to make it fun and work well with the gamepad.
Have you played it?
Yeah, I did a demo of it.
Is it like a gaze cursor and then you pull triggers
Gaze
and
cursor
stuff?
and push trigger, which work okay.
Okay.
But if you're a fan of track controllers and HTC Vive, you would hope that Crytek would just develop something that's purely touch and maximize for that experience. There is a trade-off there. You couldn't just say Oculus threw money at it, but time is something you couldn't add to it. They spent development time to make it work for the gamepad. And you have to assume that a lot of the experiences that Oculus is funding is non-track controller experiences, because that's what they're launching with this month. So the disappointment could be that that's an opportunity cost. You could have had these developers push out, maybe not hit the mass market with both platforms initially, but create and devote time to track controller experiences. And that's not what we're going to see as much of because of this.
I mean, it's a little bit fallacious though, because the Oculus SDKs and the Oculus dev kits were out for 2 years almost before the Vive was even public knowledge. So, I mean, a large part of I'm really curious to know what Vive launch titles look like. I know a bunch of people who are building Vive games and apps and things like that, but I don't know. I have no idea what day one Vive games are going to be available for sale in the store.
That is really a really good point, because PlayStation has an event coming up ahead of GDC, and we expect with PSVR, we don't even know when that's going to come out and what the pricing is, but we expect that Sony's going to be ready with like a lineup.
I mean, you and I have seen a half dozen titles for PlayStation VR already.
Yep. Some may not be exclusive, but they'll be there, right? If you invest in a PlayStation VR, you're gonna get Job Simulator, you're gonna get that the puzzle game, Super Hypercube, and that kind of stuff, and the heist.
There'll be the London heist. There'll be the game with the little robots that run away from you.
Exactly, right. You know that they're going to come out with a strong lineup. On Oculus' side, they've, obviously with the Oculus Studio games and the stuff that they're yet to announce, and even things like Dragonfront that they recently announced, it's going to be a solid lineup. There's going to be stuff to do.
And presumably they'll be able to lean on Gear VR.
Yeah.
And we'll see a lot of stuff because
my hope is that the 40 games, whatever, that they're going to come out and launch won't be dominated by Gear VR ports for a Rift. It will be focused on Rift, heavy games. On the Vive side, where I think we're all in agreement that at launch, it's a more compelling experience by the sheer fact that it has track controllers and it can allow for room scale. That Steam VR Developer Showcase, not a lot of new stuff.
Yeah. What did they have there?
They had 12 things. You had Job Simulator, Space Pirate Trainer, the audio. What's it called?
The music game.
The music game. The Hover Junkers. And it's a good selection, but it wasn't the kind of the polished console launch. And there could be, and I'm sure there are many games that are still under development and haven't been announced yet. But the Vive community, like I want to see what that lineup is.
Yeah.
It's getting down to the wire too. I wonder if there's any chance yet for Valve to announce anything first party that's going to be at launch.
I don't think so.
I don't think they're going to make Half-Life 3 for this, Jeremy. I'm sorry.
Anything. I mean, that's kind of surprising.
The time to do it would have been before pre-orders.
Yeah.
And pre-orders have happened. It's in the past now.
Yeah, it's just a little surprising. It's like a console manufacturer launching without a first-party title.
And that's not to say the games aren't out there. Like games like Raw Data with Servios that I did a demo for, that seemed like a really polished, high-quality Vive game. Worked really great with controllers and room scale, but that wasn't in the Valve lineup. So either Valve or HTC needs to get their shit together in terms of presenting the lineup for the audience.
I mean, the devil's advocate says that I kind of don't care about the volume of titles if there's one thing that I'm willing to play a lot.
Yeah.
And like a strong multiplayer game, like I haven't, like Hover Junkers or whatever it ends up being, if there's a game that I'm going to end up sinking as many hours as I put into, say, Minecraft or Team Fortress or any one of those kinds of games, I'm kind of okay if the rest of the lineup is interesting but small.
And
like the N64 launch lineup was pretty good, even though it was 3 games.
3? I thought it was just 2.
Pilot Wings and Mario 64 and Wave Race, or was Wave Race the week later?
Maybe.
Anyway,
I want a good like spectrum of games. I don't need 50 games that are Hover Junkers quality. If you have a handful of that, but if you have a great selection of arcade style games, and that's the thing that I think we're going to see more of, we're going to go back to, and why Valve was so excited to bring Space Pirate Trainer to the CMD VR showcase. And I'm surprised they didn't have the Ninja Trainer. I mean, everyone's tried that already, but simple like arcade-like experiences in room scale, as people get to learn the language, the physical language of room scale and physical language of VR. Those are the things that I want to see more of, like a good gallery of that.
Did you play Final Approach, Norm?
Yeah.
So
Final Approach, I think, is more toward the high end. That's kind of like the Hover Junkers in terms of how many assets
but it's still kind of an arcadey thing that you can just pop into and play for a little bit and pop out.
Right. I think we're going to see more of in terms of the arcade analogs. You know, we're not at Street Fighter yet, but we're definitely at like Galaga and Pac-Man of VR.
Did you play? Is Minecraft a launch title for the Rift?
No, they haven't even announced the release date.
Okay.
So we do have a Vive Pre now, and I got it as of you guys listening 2 days ago, and there are things that we can't talk about it yet, but there are things that we can talk about it. So Valve, one of the big differences, and maybe this is the reason Valve isn't doing a big like corporate style lineup announcement, because they're letting developers talk pretty freely about what they're working
their
on.
NDA. I mean, their NDA lets you talk about the NDA, like not specifics of the NDA, but like. Yeah, I was shocked.
So I do want to talk about a little about the hardware and also the software. And let's go backward on the software side. Things that I didn't really get until setting up the Vive and running Steam VR for the first time.
Just so you know, the software is constantly in flux.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What we get with this preview kit is that you get a Steam key and you unlock demos. So they're actually in Steam some beta demos that other developers, if you're working on a gamer experience, you can just enable, and everyone who has a Vive Pre or development kit can download and try.
I think it's people developing Vive Pre apps
or
just for the record.
You need the key to unlock it.
Right. Like that registers you as a owner of an application that says I'm a Steam Vive developer, which then like I think when you buy a Vive, you're not going to get the same.
No. I mean, I meant for the Pre.
Yeah.
So for the Pre, for all the current developers, how many thousands of them there are. So this is how people have been able to demo things like the Aperture Science, repair room, the Fruit Ninja clone, things like now Space Pirate Trainer, and so I think there are about 19 of them right now in Steam VR, and I tried them all yesterday, and the things I kept on going back to were the Fruit Ninja, the Ninja Trainer.
Ninja Trainer is so much fun,
and the Space Pirate Trainer. Love Space. It's simple.
Do you have
games.
Jibo Man?
I have Jibo Man. There were some. It wasn't. There were, I think, design problems with that game, but
if your space isn't right for Jibo Man, it's less fun, and I think they're aware of that.
Yeah, but I think simplicity is a strong point. It's a strong suit of early VR and these VR games. I will say, if you are working on a Steam VR, a Vive experience or game, and you would like me to try it and demo it, I'd love to get it. You can email me, Norman@tested.com, and we can talk and you can send me a Steam key and I'll try it out because I'm looking for more experiences to try with it. The Steam VR interface is great.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's just the 10-foot interface from the living room, but you have a laser pointer and it works really well.
Yeah. So this is something that I think will be a differentiating factor between Vive and Rift. Just the interface.
It's the motion control.
Well, we don't know what the Rift interface looks like,
But it comes down to interface. I mean, it comes down to physical interface, right? I mean, you can't do that kind of interface with the gamepad.
Right.
Well,
so
you can though.
So Gear VR is the only example we can look at right now. In Gear VR, when you load up Oculus Home, which is what they're calling it, it's a floating. You're in a virtual environment, and you can look around 360, and you see floating in front of that environment, whether it's the living room or that fancy house that they put you in, floating tiles, much like a console home screen.
Yeah.
Right. Like the new PlayStation home screen or the Xbox home screen, and use the gamepad or your touch pad and use gaze look to select things. Right.
Yeah. But you could theoretically use the D-pad to to move around.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to be intuitive. It's going to be easy for you to use. And it is a way for you to buy games, launch games, hopefully when the Rift comes out, manage friends and do some type of friends, with a microphone and headphones, some communication. But really it's a launcher, right? With the Steam one is also a launcher, but Steam VR floats in front of you where you deploy it. And it goes back to what you're talking about. This is a limitation or advantage of track controllers. It only appears when you want it to. So just like the Steam VR overlay, or the Steam overlay when you're in game, if you're playing Team Fortress and you pressed, what is it, Shift Tab, and then the Steam, it pops up on your screen. It's like that, except it hovers in front of where you want, and the game fades into the background and pops up.
Is this where you'll eventually get Chaperone 2 overlaid?
No, Chaperone pops up whenever you see it.
Yeah, Chaperone's always.
It's always like if you get near the wall, Chaperone pops up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this overlay pops up, and it's not always just fixed. It can be further away from you, closer to you, depending on where you project it. And
I think it's always the same distance from your head. The difference is that it fires at the orientation that your head is at when you press the Steam overlay button.
Right. So always maybe projects let's say
it's like 6 or 8 feet.
but then you could walk up to it.
You can walk up to it. You can get sideways to it too, which is super weird.
And then it's a floating menu in space, kind of like as if the overlay was an augmented reality thing that popped up in the reality of the game.
Right.
And then you can point and select things with basically a laser pointer with a controller. And because it's Steam, you can open a web browser there. There's shopping and there's launching titles.
You can do friends lists.
You can do friends lists, and it feels robust. Like it feels like a window to more than just the store.
Well, and because you have the track controllers, it's like you have a mouse, so you can also do things. You can do Minority Report business, and like if you're scrolling through your games list, you can grab the bottom of the list with the trigger and swing up. Yeah. Like it's or you can use the trackpad, I think, even to scroll around too.
This, and only you see it. So this feels like a really like the first step analog to Ready Player One, where Wade's in his classroom and he pulls up his web browser and gets to browse. So you can be in an MMO, you can pull up your Steam window and you see only your information, and you get to download content, do things with your friends list, or web browse or something.
Well, so the things that I'm really surprised that there's not built into Steam. Like I expected them to turn this on ages ago, a way to just load up your 2D games in that like loading screen environment, so that you can do the giant virtual screen, even though it's dumb for a multitude of reasons. Like there are times that I would like to just put the headset on and be totally immersed in whatever game I'm playing, even if it's a traditional 2D game.
We talked about this, and I said it's impossible, and you both said it's probably possible.
It's really easy to do.
But it turns out it's already being done.
Yeah.
So you can do that.
I was pretty sure of that when we were talking.
You sounded pretty confident, and you were right to be so. You can do it in VR desktop.
You can do it. VR desktop is one of the places you can do it. There's like calls built into Unity that let you grab pretty much any window on the machine as well.
But you can get in a virtual living room and project games onto a TV.
So it's in like you want to do it in kind of your loading space, your white space, which in Steam VR is literally a white space. Or you can load images, like you can load basically a wallpaper that wraps around you. That's a landscape.
I didn't know that.
So I have like a nice landscape.
I like the half sphere above you with the horizon line. That's a half mile away, it looks like.
Yeah. So like eventually I want that space to be a photogrammetry or mapped representation of my room.
Or a room that represents you.
It represents where I am. Exactly. I want to be able to map my room and have that. So my loading space is the virtual representation of the room.
You want to hear something really cool, Norm?
What's something really cool?
the headsets know what lighthouses they're connected to. And when you move a machine from one set of lighthouses to another, if it's been set up for that room before, it says, "Oh, I know this room."
And it draws the chaperone.
And it gives you the right chaperone. So presumably you could have different virtual rooms that line up with different real rooms if they get to that.
Just don't move to lighthouses.
If you move the lighthouses, that all goes.
That's more. That's more reason to have mobile VR and have Steam VR put in your backpack, and then have lighthouses set up all around your house, and then you can house scale.
Great. I'm coming to your house.
Yeah.
Did you
mount those lighthouses?
You know, this reminds me of Project Titan from Google. I don't know if you guys remember that, but The Verge, maybe a week or two ago, they posted a little refresher on that and how it might relate to their VR plans. And it's basically the guy.
You mean Tango?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it Tango?
Tango, yeah.
Yeah. So it's where they take a phone and they are able to scan in rooms with it, and they're able to do motion tracking with sensors on a phone, as opposed to needing any kind of outside light sources or IR sensors.
Right. It's like the structure sensor that we had here, except using phone technology as opposed to an accessory.
Exactly. But that can actually, scan an entire geometries and throughout rooms and remember
with texture
everything
too.
about it. Yeah,
because you're just using the camera phone.
Yeah.
Vive Pre hardware. Things that I found interesting. I still think ergonomically, having more time with it now, I still think it feels a little front heavy.
There is, I can't talk about the other one, but the back strap, that versus the original dev kits, it was a huge improvement having the lower strap in the back where it kind of cups the base of your skull.
It feels it's like a harness,
as
opposed to a headband.
Like if it doesn't pull pretty far down, you don't have it on right. You want that over the back here at the low part of the bony part of the back of your skull. Couple of things.
But the fundamental difference is, even though it is a harness with like a 3-point connection, it's still soft straps.
It's not rigid.
It's not rigid straps.
Yeah. The thing I noticed last week, we talked about last week, the depth of the width of the field of view.
Yeah.
You can actually pop out the sides. I didn't know this at the time, but you can pop out the place where the straps connect, and there's a little dial that you can turn to bring it closer or further away. Mm-hmm. I would highly recommend that you get that as close as you can when you get a Vive.
The field of view.
The closer it is to your glasses or your eyes, the better off you're going to be.
It's just like the DK2.
Yes. That's right. We use a screw on the side.
It's very comfortable with glasses on, which is really, really nice for me as a person who wears glasses.
Barely fits my glasses.
Your glasses aren't wider than mine, are they?
I think maybe it's the height. I don't know. They're about the same. It's barely comfortable. I still actually prefer using it without glasses.
Obviously.
And then the controller is a big thing. And I don't know if a lot of people have talked about just the physical difference in where the sensor placement is between the first Vive DK controller and the Vive Pre, and presumably the final version, the CV1 controller. But the actual location of the sensors are different.
They optimize that to make it more difficult to occlude. Self-occlude.
And also clash with each other.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that in some of the Vive software demos, where the developers have put in the Valve provided, old controller model, there are cases where if you pull up the Steam VR overlay, you have the old model superimposed over the new model, and you can see where the sensors are actually placed differently. It's definitely less Mace-like.
Are the two controllers identical?
The two controllers are identical. Yeah, so they're not chiral. Oculus Touch will be.
No, I meant, are the sensors in the same spot on both controllers? So can the Vive tell them apart?
The Vive can tell them apart, and that's with the radio, though.
Got it.
So I think when you pair, that differentiates controller 1 and controller 2. And a lot of experiences only use one controller. So you either turn off the controller, and I actually prefer turning off the second controller as opposed to putting it on the floor, because that can activate chaperone. Now, Will, is this the case for you? I couldn't get the camera system to work, the Vive Pre camera.
You have to turn it on in the Steam control panel on the desktop old school version of Steam. There's a check mark that says enable camera in there. And then when you do that, there's a thing that pops up in the Steam overlay inside VR that says room view. And if you click on that, then anytime you turn on the Steam overlay, there will be a camera attached to the hand that you press the Steam overlay button on.
Jeez, where the laser pointer is.
Where the laser pointer comes from. And it usually sits to the left of that one, not like regardless of which hand it is, which is maybe it's on the right for the left hand.
I gotta test this, but it doesn't have that Tron view. Is that Tron view enabled?
I have not seen the Tron view anywhere.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's interesting.
Which, like, from what you said before, it didn't sound like I was really missing a whole lot.
No, it's just an advanced version of Chaperone for comfort. Like Chaperone right now, I have a weird. It's not a. My play area is always going to be a rectangle.
Yeah.
Or a four-pointed area, but I have a weird layout that I've drawn for my boundaries, and it's cool to see that holodeck not be just like a rectangle or a cube, but have like multiple angles.
Yeah,
you can walk into nooks and stuff like that.
You can. Well, so there's two things that this is something people don't know. There's two things that are important. There's the chaperone area, which is the area that you can walk in without smashing into shit, and then there's the play area, which is the area that games will put you inside.
Yes, and the
games
play area,
generally don't put you outside of the play area.
Right. Right.
And that's just usually a rectangle. There are a certain specified number of sizes. I think the smallest one is 1.25 by 2.5 meters.
Yeah.
That's what I use just for simplicity and to make sure that our stuff works with min spec. But it's like that is a real, like that's the size that you need. And as I understand it, everything that's room scale will work inside that 1.5. So Valve 1.25 by 2.5.
Valve requires developers to support that min spec.
I don't know the specifics on that. It's not something we've hit. We run into.
Okay.
And the min spec actually isn't. I mean, the Aperture robot repair demo actually is much bigger than that min spec.
They just updated it yesterday.
Because I loaded that up, and I couldn't. It was beyond my play space. I couldn't get to the area to start that demo. But it really is. It's math.
You can extend the controller though, right?
It was beyond a wall. Yeah. So if you have a weird room setup that isn't exactly rectangular, or you have obstacles that you can't move, like a big shelf or something, you can draw your boundary perfectly around that shelf. But then it'll calculate. Okay, here's the biggest solid, uninterrupted rectangular space within that, and then that will be your play area.
And it may be cattywampus for it'll take the biggest rectangle it can give you in the space. So you may end up with a rectangle that's diagonal in relation to the room.
Right. It'll take area over surface area.
Well, it goes for the maximum area, not the one that is contiguous with the walls of the room.
Yep.
Or parallel with the walls of the room.
Yep. The other thing that I thought was really interesting after using Vive Pre for a while, one of my concerns is always ergonomics, not only ergonomics of headset, but ergonomics of the controllers. Mm-hmm. I know, Jeremy, you haven't used Oculus Touch, and Oculus Touch, from what we've described it as basically if you take a Wii nunchuck and you cup it inside your hand, the Wii nunchuck, not the Wiimote, the nunchuck.
It's the neutral. Like if you just hold your hand in the neutral position, that's
how you would hold it.
Yeah, that's how it just rests in the right spot.
And that's why they're chiral. That's why there's left and right touch controllers, because they fit onto your inside your left and right hands. Mm-hmm. And the Half Moon, the constellation sensors are ringed around the front of your hand as opposed to bulged out. So theoretically, you can put your hands closer together and not bump them into each other as much. But one of the limitations of that, and I think Oculus designed that specifically because they want your hands to be in a neutral position. So you can do gestures like pointing, thumbs up, and grabbing things.
It means it's very comfortable.
Yeah, and it also still works with like a shooter. Because it turns out the ergonomics of a pistol grip designed to be very comfortable and a neutral pose because, hundreds of years of gun development. But the gripping action, which is like one of the biggest actions you can do in VR, picking the stuff up and holding things in the Oculus Touch, it's a button that's in the front of the controller that's contoured to your middle finger. So you press it and you grip it by basically squeezing your middle finger in, not your trigger finger. If you think about how you pick things up in the real world, like for example, if I want to pick up this small bottle in front of me, I pick it up with my index fingers.
Yeah.
If I want to grip something, if I'm holding something, then yes, I grip it with my middle finger and the inner palm. The Oculus, the thing that in Toy Box and the other demos that have felt weird in Oculus is picking things up. Holding things and gripping things feels natural, but picking things up with the inner parts of your finger and not the tips of your finger, you can't do that with a touch controller.
Well, so the only thing my only exposure to the touch controller was at E3 last year, and then at Connect in the fall. And on the Sunday of Connect, the last morning of Connect, I went back and spent 2 hours doing those 15-minute demo loops in the touch room, just to spend a lot of time with it as possible. You really adapt quickly to pulling in that middle finger. It becomes something you don't even think about after a little. It doesn't feel quite as natural.
I imagine it feels a little robotic even.
A little bit, but the visual overwhelms it. So because a lot of it's snap, once you grip it, then it models it so you're holding it already. The thing that felt weirdest was maybe in Toy Box holding a ping pong paddle, because I would never hold a ping pong paddle the way, gripping it that way, the way the game was modeled, and the way it had me pick it up.
The thing that gets weird is if you have a represent. So I haven't spent as much. I've hardly spent any time with the touch compared to what I spent with the Vive. The Vive, I think, smartly models the controllers in the world, whereas the touch stuff that they showed at Connect, at least, was mostly showing you virtual representation of your hands,
abstracted,
right? Which worked reasonably well. The thing that gets weird for me is when you have, like, if you're holding, say, a sword, and instead of it lining up with the pre-controller in your hand, it lines up with it, like it shoots out the front of your hand, and the handle of the sword doesn't line up with the pre-controller. That feels weird to me.
Yeah.
So I think that's the, like, giving you the proprioception of the fingers and the hand and the holder versus is the important thing.
And there he goes. I think that's you've hit on the fundamental difference in representation, because I now think about playing the flight control game. What's it called? Basically, it's flight control for VR.
What is it called? Final Approach.
Final Approach in VR with the Vive. And that game, you're not holding Vive controllers. It is trying to model your hand.
It's a finger, yeah.
And that is weird with the Vive controllers modeling your hand. I think the Vive does a better job, the way the controllers are tracking away your action, of modeling things that you pick up with the controllers, whether it's swords or water bottles or torches, as opposed to modeling your hand. And touch will do a better job of modeling your hand as opposed to the things you're picking up.
You can, there are several examples of hand modeling on the Vive stuff that works well. The job simulator stuff gives you a hand analog,
but they intentionally abstract that more and have a bigger hand.
Oh yeah, they're cartoon Mickey Mouse hands,
because it's not going to be your one-to-one. Like the thing I was really impressed with the touch is how good that neutral pose is in mapping to your hand, where I could peek through. Remember, I was peeking through the Rift glasses and I could see my hand transition into the virtual hand, and it was one-to-one,
because the controller is designed in such a way that your hand rests in the way the fingers are going to be. Yeah,
and so it's smarter about of representing your hand. So I think those are, functionally, they might be exactly the same in terms of like the actions you can do, but from a what's going to look best and feel the most natural. Again, we won't know until touch comes out. My guess is that touch does a better job representing your hand, and Vive does a better job representing the objects that you're interacting with.
I think that this is very much one of those things that in like 2 years we'll be laughing about, maybe 3 years we'll be laughing about, because the tracking, like these rough hand analogs will be something that you use when you want to use a sculpting app or when you want to use a drawing app or something like that. And when you have something that you actually use your hands for, you'll just use your hands.
And Chet said the same thing on Twitter. And there are two things he's sure about with VR trend-wise. One, tracking spaces are only going to get bigger. And two, abstraction is only going to be, controllers are only going to be less abstracted going forward. Now, one advantage of the Vive controller not exactly mapping your hand, but mapping the objects you interact with is I found it really cool, like in the Fruit Ninja game, basically.
Ninja Trainer.
I can, because it's representing the katana, I can hold that in all sorts of grips.
Yeah.
And it still works.
Like you can two-hand, I don't know if you can two-hand it with the new controller. With the old controller, you could two-hand it and it felt like a sword, which was awesome.
Ergonomically, that might be a little more comfortable.
A little short.
Like you can manipulate it more freely in your hand because it's just like holding a virtual stick, and you're not going to lose tracking. The representation is going to be off because your hand's holding it in a different place.
That's exactly it. The one thing I want to warn everybody, because we're getting close to when we're getting these things, if you with the hand controllers, I have multiple times set them down on tables that exist in VR, but don't line up with tables in the real world, which it resulted in a smashed controller once. Like, it's the dopiest thing in the world to do, but they like, this isn't like the Wii where they have straps for insurance purposes. They have straps so that you don't accidentally drop them, because it's only a matter of time before you forget and do it.
Yeah.
Didn't the Oculus, was it Guitar Hero that's coming out for Oculus? Rockman. Didn't that show the touch controller strapped to a guitar?
They tucked it into the end of the guitar.
As a capo?
I think that was, I don't know if that was
Is that not how it'll be tracked?
I don't know that that's how it will be tracked.
No, just thinking,
unclear to me.
there's other ways to use these controllers than holding them.
Yeah, no, it's true. And the Constellation system, the touch controllers aren't going to be the only accessories, I think, that you're going to see. Just like for Rock Band, you're going to need to track the guitar. Yeah. And that design of putting, the Constellation, Half Moon, that arc on the guitar like a capo, I think works perfectly to track that.
The other example of somebody using an extra controller for something neat is the Fantastic Contraption folks.
Yeah.
They use that to track the physical camera in virtual space so that you can line up their augmented reality, mixed reality extremes, which are awesome.
It seems like that's going to be one of the possible killer apps. Yeah. It seems like a lot of developers like that game.
Right. Vive comes with Fantastic Contraption, Job Simulator, and Tilt Brush. Those are all included in the pre-order.
Fantastic Contraption takes a little bit of space. It's better with more space, I would say. Although I haven't played it recently. It's really, really, it's a really neat game. Like, people look at it and like, oh, it's cartoony, it has a big goofy cat. It is a thing that you will spend a lot of time with if you like games about building things to solve problems.
There was also a little discussion online about, people have been debating about this for almost a year now, but just the tracking accuracy and difference between room scale capabilities between Rift and Vive. We know Vive works room scale. Palmer has said that they can do room scale with 2 cameras on the Rift, and it's all about adding more cameras. You want to just compensate for occlusion and stuff like that. And there was a really good post in the Reddit Oculus forums about how important the IMU data is to tracking. And it's really not just about whatever, lighthouse system or constellation system you're using. That gives you some positional accuracy, but those are only polling at as fast as the cameras, whether the cameras are built into the controllers on the Vive or built into the wall mounts. On the Oculus side, those are like 60 hertz cameras, right? They're only refreshing so much. It's all about those IMUs that refresh at potentially hundreds and thousands of times a second.
The external thing is just to give a reference. Like to correct errors, basically, in drift.
Yeah, small drift over time. And so it really is like sensor fusion. You talk about, leap motion, right? I don't foresee leap motion being the only way you'll be able to track your hands in games. And it could be a system like leap motion combined with a system like Constellation, combined with a system like Lighthouse that we're using, a couple of years from now.
There are, I don't want to say dozens because I don't know of dozens, but I know of more than a handful of people that are working on companies that are working on hardware tracking for hands, bodies, feet, like all the stuff that you need to get the full haptic suit, right? It's coming.
One step at a time.
The Soylent's already there, Jeremy. You're halfway there.
One step at a time.
It's that haptic feedback that's just as crucial as getting the hand tracking, though. At least to me, for immersion.
That's it for the VR Minute this week. We'll be doing more stuff with our Vive Pre. Again, if you have demos that you'd like for us to test and try out, send me an email, norman@tested.com, and I'd love to try them out. Even things that maybe we can't show publicly yet, I'd still love to try it out. I'll sign NDAs for this stuff. And on to our last segment, testing this week. Hey, what have you guys been testing?
It's really jam bandy. I like that one.
Yep. Horde Festival right there.
So?
Super hot.
Oh, yeah. So that came out, right? But not for VR.
No, not for VR. People are really pissed.
I don't know if people are pissed. It's super fun.
It's an amazing
VR.
game. Yeah.
I've played it both on my desktop and also on the couch with the Steam controllers.
Oh, did it work? The Steam Link?
Yeah, totally works.
Oh, it didn't work for me.
So is it mouse and keyboard as well as gamepad, or no?
I've been playing with a gamepad.
It works well with gamepad.
Wait.
I still have to play it.
I think
that's true.
I've performed better with mouse and keyboard, but it was totally playable with the Steam controller.
Cool.
It's a lot of fun. It's only about, you can beat it in, I think, 2 or 3 hours, 20 levels. Conceptually really interesting, and think of it more of a puzzle game than a shooter. And I can't wait to play it in VR.
It's a really, there's a whole meta thing that's wrapped around the game that we saw at Oculus 2 years ago, 3 years ago now. That's really, really like, I don't know. It's neat. It's good. It's the kind of thing, like, it's real grungy cyberpunk stuff that I like.
Have they announced a VR release date?
They have said that they have hired a VR developer.
Ouch.
Well, no, like somebody who's working full time on making it awesome in VR.
Yeah, it just doesn't sound like a launch title.
It's not a launch title.
All right.
Have you played? We talked about Overwatch.
Well, dude, I was trying to get you into the last beta weekend.
You were right.
That's the one I had access to. I thought it was the best thing ever.
It is the best thing ever. I need to get you a key so we can stream it.
Dude, you can't do that. I won't do anything else. That game is so fun.
I had to uninstall it while we were doing our final thing the other day. I was like, I'm taking this off the machine right now, because it's like you just pop in for 5 or 10 minutes and play, and then
And after every match, one player gets highlighted as the play of the game. Were you ever chosen as the play of the game?
When am I not the play of the game?
Is that not a good feeling?
It's pretty good. Sometimes it's a little cheesy when it's like the turret guy or something like that, and the play of the game is you sitting there hammering something with a wrench. But yeah, it's pretty good.
I suppose that's true. Sometimes the medic gets chosen. You're like, medic got chosen as the play of the game.
Just if you're playing Overwatch, and I know not many of you are because it's in beta, and I know that's lame that we're talking about it, but like if a healer is ever in that promotions, did they have the little promotion screen at the end where like 4 or 5 people who've done something who did well?
Yeah.
Get
and
you
vote
can thumbs up them.
Yeah,
medic always thumbs up the medic. That's my rule.
Me too. I do the same thing. I
support people.
I have sometimes been chosen to be in that group of people, but I never get thumbed up.
Really?
I'm not there yet.
Oh, I campaign. If I'm in that, I'm like, hey man, that was some killer Roadhog work.
I mean, once that game is out, we're putting the band back together. All the TF2 players are coming back.
When's it supposed to come out?
June, I think.
Okay.
You'll
be in
good.
VR. You'll be heavy in VR then.
Dude, I will take a break for this game.
You're not. I mean, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, after playing Bullet Train at Oculus Connect, I came back to play Halo 5. I was like, oh man, it's just Halo 5. It's only like a 16th of my total view field.
Is Bullet Train really that compelling?
It's pretty.
It's a Space Pirate Trainer.
Space Pirate Trainer is. I see Norm popping into Space Pirate Trainer.
Space Pirate Trainer.
Well, I got to come to one of your Vive, dev units to come play that.
You've got to get the Hover Junkers guys to hook you up.
Hover Junkers guys, hook me up.
Yeah.
Hey, Brandon and Alex.
Wow.
So what else? I've been using the Avant Glyph. Mentioned that last week.
So, can I ask you?
Yes, you may.
Why?
Why would you buy
would you buy? It's $800 or $600?
$700.
It's really expensive.
Yes.
What is it?
And it's just a big TV for your eyes.
Yeah. So totally. It is probably the best TV for your eyes type of Sony experience you can have, like a Sony HM Z T1, T2, T3 experience you could have. But it's not a VR headset, and it's very expensive for what it is. It really is a demonstration of DLP technology in a headset. Mm-hmm. But if you have the money to spend, and let's say you have a Inspire 1 that you spent $2,800 on, DJI Inspire 1, and you want to fly and be able to see what your quadcopter sees out in the open when you're in Golden Gate Park or Treasure Island, this is the best way to do it. Hands down.
Wouldn't you rather be looking at the feed on an iPad so you can watch the quad as well?
Well, this one doesn't block out your field of view. There's no eye gasket, so you can peek up and down.
But can you see it when it's bright?
You can see it
full brightness, full daylight?
Brightness, lowest brightness on the headset, perfectly clear.
Okay, so it's an accessory for quads.
It's an accessory for quads.
That's an expensive ass accessory for quads when you get the Fat Sharks for what, $250 or $300?
Not if you want HD. Now those are completely different because Fat Sharks are analog.
No, I know.
And the HD Fat Sharks are still in the $500 range. Okay. This one, I think Kickstarter backers got it for $500. Like I said, expensive.
Yep.
Really expensive. But
is it comfortable?
It's comfortable. It's if you want to watch movies on the couch, watch YouTube or Netflix or TED Talks on the couch or in bed, it's nice. I actually like that it does not block out the outside world. So you're looking for different experiences. Like Gear VR blocks out the outside world, makes you sit in a virtual theater, also super comfortable. But there's that weird like if you're in a public space or if you're even in a common place with friends, wearing Gear VR is weird. People are going to be looking at you. There's a hypersensitivity. Like I tried using it on an airplane, didn't work great, but you feel like people are looking at you.
So I've used it on an airplane before. The gear, and it's profoundly weird.
Yeah.
Like it's fine, it works, you don't drift or anything like that, but I feel like people are grabbing my crotch or something.
That's right, or staring at you, or you feel like a body, like a tenseness in your body.
Way worse than wearing Google Glass.
Wait, you don't get a drift like you do in a car?
You don't
take
turn
off,
enough. You can't use it during takeoff and landing or final approach.
But you do as the plane turns.
A little
if
bit,
it turns.
but it's like you just hit the button
gotcha.
every 10 minutes maybe.
Okay. With this, the glyph, because people are still going to look at you because it looks a little weird. You're Geordieing it, you're front lobot. Front lobot. But you can see the outside world. You're totally aware of your surroundings.
And people staring at you.
And maybe some people staring at you, but you don't feel uneasy about it, like about your body. Like, and you never feel disconnected. Yep. So it did work best with the quadcopters. Totally works with, plugged into a phone or a tablet to stream the video. It's stupid expensive if you're just using it for those things, and unless you have the money. But the technology works. No screen door effect, really high pixel fill, really bright, and good imagery. We have the Carvey. We mentioned that last week. Been cutting some stuff with the Carvey. Haven't used it enough yet to say whether it's something people should pick up.
Does everyone know what a Carvey is?
It's a CNC, desktop CNC. So desktop milling
CNC
machine.
mill.
CNC mill. So, before 3D printers and before, desktop laser cutters, when you say CNC, when it shops at CNC, they mean the milling machine. So this is purely 2-axis. I guess is it 3-axis? I guess it's 3-axis. It goes up, down,
Yes.
XYZ. Yeah, it's a 3-axis CNC, so you can carve 2.5D designs essentially, right? You can do cooler stuff with that, but it's made for the desktop, so it has a cover. You can cut things that are about 8 by 12, 8 by 11 and a half. Materials up to almost 3 inches. And we're trying to find a good use case for it, because just like 3D printers and laser cutters, by themselves, they're cool, but it really becomes more powerful when you combine it with other things. If you CNC something and then you laser etch, and then you put it on the bandsaw, and then you use it among other tools. I think the Carvey is going to be a really good teaching tool. Because of how easy the software is to use, the web app, the easel software, and how self-contained, how safe it is. So I feel like it's going to be something that high schools are going to want to teach kids CNC, because you can have teams working on the software and then plug it over USB, set the project, and get something etched and carved in.
Yeah, it'd be cool to have a high school engineering class or shop class. Would it be a shop class these days? CNC work. But if they took a team,
that should be shop class,
and then everybody sort of spread apart. You had like your 3D printer team and your CNC milling team and your laser cutting team, and they all had to collaborate to make something together.
And this is like the 21st century shop class.
Yeah,
where there's the digital element, right? You have a laptop in shop class.
Yeah,
because you have CNC. So we've been testing that. We mentioned Glowforge last week, and
where's my Glowforge?
Did Dan give you grief about calling him out on the show?
The forums gave me grief.
Oh, really?
The forums freaked out. So I want to...
The Glowforge forums or the tested forums?
The Glowforge forums. So, Jeremy, you weren't here.
No.
We talked last week about the Carvey, and Kishore asked, how's that Glowforge thing going?
Right on.
And I said, no, it's still not out yet. Still don't have it yet. We literally talked about it for maybe 20 seconds, because I don't want to talk about it, because originally I was going to use Glowforge for wedding invitations, and I can't do that now because the time has passed. If it shipped at the end of last year, that would work, but it's not going to be ready till I think June is when all the backers, all the people who ordered in the first period, which I believe ended October 31st, they're going to get theirs before June.
Okay.
Timing wise, that's not going to work for me. So I sound a little irked, and people in the Glowforge forums were like, oh no, Tested hates it. Should they get a beta? They shouldn't get a beta. And to be clear, I talked to Dan a while ago before they announced the beta. Jeremy, you and I had talked. You wanted to get into the beta.
I applied for the beta.
You applied for the beta. Privately, between me and Dan, we decided it doesn't make sense for us to get the beta. As early as I want a unit, I want a production unit. That's what we're going to evaluate. If we paid for one, we're going to get the production unit, not the beta unit, because that's what the experience is. And I'd rather the people who work in hacker spaces and schools get the beta units, because they're the ones who are going to actually be taxing it and helping solve the problems and feeding back into the product development so that the final units are going to be perfect. So the beta units would have been wasted. As fun as it would be to get the beta and as useful as it would have been for me to do wedding invitations on the beta unit, it didn't make sense. Like practically.
So are you not inviting people to your wedding now?
No, we'll just do it other ways. So Jeremy, I know you applied for the beta, but like the beta system's already out. I don't think Tested is the right place to have the beta anyway.
Whatever. They're replacing the betas, obviously. You would get both.
Yeah.
It's not
But
one. One or the other.
it's also the experience.
I like tinkering. I'm an early adopter. I'd be perfectly happy with the beta. However, I'm more than happy to let them take all the time they need to make it right.
That's right.
It's got a lot of new technology that it has to, that has not been tested yet. So let's do it right.
And I guess the only thing that you could give them grief about is that they did promise. They said they would ship before the end of the year,
Which they did. Betas.
they technically did, and that technicality, I would give them a little grief over
It's
that.
like Tesla and the Model X.
I'll give Tesla grief about that too. I mean, a lot of people put their money down because they charge you when you put your money down.
That's right.
And a lot of people did that with the assumption that they're, it wasn't clear that they would be shipping. They said the first few units, and that was clear. So however early you were, but it was only beta units. So again, I'm more than happy to give them, like you, give them the time to finish and get it right.
I am really looking forward to it, though.
And they've been good about communicating. And the next time we're in Seattle, I want to stop by and get an update. But as of right now, I think they've publicly said end of June is when they would ship the entire first batch by the end of June.
They said the first half of this year, right?
By the first half of this year, they would ship everyone who ordered in that first initial backing time.
Which said to me, like, they would be shipping them out in waves and everyone would get them by the end of June. So
I don't want to read into it. 'Cause
Maybe not.
I don't want to set those expectations for both myself or other people. Just know that we're excited about the potential of the Glowforge. And it gives us a little time because we have access to, more expensive and professional laser cutters. And the promise of something like the Glowforge and things like the Carvey and, the MakerBot and the Ultimaker is accessibility, right? Both Glowforge and Inventables they're building web apps to make it easy for you to, in the first 15 minutes, get something done and build something. And that's not how these type of machines have traditionally been operated in the past. Like, you would not go to your makerspace and tech shop and say, I'm ready to, first 5 minutes, get me on the CNC. You need to go through safety and so it's a whole different market. And so I think that we need to understand what is required on the high end to be able to compare what it's going to be on the entry level on these more accessible.
So you're going to go to
machines.
tech shop and take the laser class?
Well, we have a laser. Frank has a new laser, and professional laser, and he's been using it and learning a lot of the safety stuff. So we're going to get him on board to talk about laser safety, and so we have some context.
I mean, just the time that I spent, and you spent some time with Adam's laser as well, like just learning the kind of ins and outs of that software to the point that you could do basic cuts and etching was a multi-hour process. So the fact that these new tools have much faster on-ramps is really exciting.
to be fair, by the way, the tech shop class, which I've taken
4 hours.
is basically that.
Yeah.
Like, it's a software class.
Yeah.
It's how to use the 3D printer.
And a list of stuff to put in or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And
Which is
you
important.
don't do your own maintenance on those machines,
Right.
Right. So owning a machine is also different from using a machine.
It's true.
Yeah. The last thing I want to talk about before we sign off is Game Frame.
Oh my gosh. That's
Game
not on the list.
frames.
Yep. What do you want to talk about?
Well, what's new? What's going on?
Game Frame 2.0 has been launched as of February 16th. So it's available on ledsec.com. If you've ever watched the tested videos and noticed this spiffy animated pixel frame in the background,
Hey, Will Smith on Twitter, what's that thing behind you on the podcast by Norm?
check it out at ledsec.com.
LEDSEQ?
LEDSEQ. Yeah.
SEQ.
So it's completely revamped. I spent about a year redesigning the software and everything about the circuit boards up through the frame. There's a whole